Live. Hi, guys. Hi, gal.
Hello,
Hi, everybody. How's it all going? You're the gal tonight, yeah.
Hi.
At this point, anyway, And listen, wow, we've already got Phoenix Rider in the comments listening to Billy Idol. Yeah, I don't know about that. So anyway, greetings. Welcome to another edition of the Breakfast Club Jamboree. I'm obviously Got That Funk. Down below me, we have Jack Burchell, who's once or twice done guest videos for us before. It's very glad to have you here, Jack. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Things are going well. I've got
I'm really pleased that you could join us. It's nice. It's nice to have some fresh blood to put on the barbecue. Yeah. Have you got anything that you'd like to, since you're new here tonight, Jack? Is there anything that's been stewing on your mind that you'd like to discuss?
I think everybody's thinking about police violence these days. That's the big thing that's been on my mind for 100 days here in Portland, Oregon, where we have become the political football. And I don't know if you guys can hear me okay.
If you could put it up just a little, I can hear you, but I have to struggle, but I'm deaf. So what's, yeah.
Yeah, did you say something about football?
I mean, speaking of football, I heard that Colin Kaepernick got an apology from the NFL for the whole take a knee business.
Oh, I hadn't heard about that.
It only took 3 years.
Right? But protests are working.
Wow. Yeah, there's definitely progress happening.
So, I mean, did you say that you're in Oregon, Jack, at the moment?
Yeah, I live in Portland, Oregon.
Oh, right. So you are literally in the epicenter.
Yeah, in fact, my art studio is just like 3 blocks from where things generally are getting crazy every night.
Right. Have you done any protesting or demonstrating yourself?
I have, but I haven't gotten very close to any of the real action in the times that I've went. I haven't gone every night by any stretch of the imagination, but the times I have gone, if there was any collisions between protesters, police, or Proud Boys, it's been blocks and blocks away from where I was.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it was last weekend or earlier this week. I don't remember which day it was, but I know there was a Trump supporter that got shot in Portland very recently. And obviously that's indefensible. And I take it the perpetrator was shot, I think yesterday in Olympia, Washington. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. There was some kind of raid that on his property, or and I don't know all the details, and of course, social media distorts things, so it's difficult to know what actually happened. But yeah, it's, the cops apparently did a raid and killed him, and I don't know much more than that.
I do because conspiracy TikTok has taken off on this because hours before his death by police, the man did an interview with Vice News.
Right.
And he had a giant tattoo of the fist for the movement right here on his neck. So he was definitely passionate, because you don't stick something on your neck if you don't really want people to see it. But
right.
Yeah.
Who'd the police kill now?
The guy who shot the Trump supporter in Portland, the police went and got him. And in between those two events, Vice News interviewed him.
Yeah. Yeah, they didn't somehow manage not to kill Rittenhouse and didn't raid his house.
Yeah.
I'm so fucking fed up, man. Not to derail the conversation, but with all the shit that's gone on in the last 4 fucking years with this piece of shit that's in the White House, and as much as we have differences on the left, we're more unified than we've been in a long time. We have, there's some differences on the margin, but for the most part, most of us are on board, even if we think, whether or not we're happy with the candidate or not. And so many Republicans that are like tired of Trump or sick of Trump or afraid of Trump and wanting gun. I don't understand why this fucker is still polling around 42% nationwide. I don't get it. I mean, because he's been there for the whole time. That's the whole thing. So that means, so that means that there's people like leaving him and other people that weren't engaged joining his fucking banner. That's what it means.
Some people, for some reason, actually like his bullying style. They like the fact that he doesn't try to reach out across the aisle. He just goes for what he wants and doesn't. And it's weird to me that people think that that's okay.
I mean, he's literally the worst human being ever to occupy that office, and I say that without fear of contradiction.
Right. I've been sort of digging into the QAnon rabbit hole. Because the whole QAnon thing is interesting to me. I have a fascination with conversion and deconversion stories, people's, leaving Christianity or joining other cults. And so the QAnon thing kind of fascinates me from that perspective. And it strikes me that they are operating in a really similar sphere. I mean, the QAnon and Trump Venn diagram isn't a complete circle, but it's really freaking close. And it's the same mentality of it's a constant revision of the facts in order to fit what, like, reality gets bent around what would have to be true for this particular behavior to be correct. And so it's a reverse engineering of this thing that, Trump does in person, or, this Q drop on the other side, that's just filled with crazy, basically it's an ARG run by teenagers. And in order to make the statements make sense, they have to kind of reconstruct this entire, put together all these puzzle pieces in order to make it work. And it's the more they've invested in that, the more sort of like, the sunk cost, integrity, their beliefs, their reality warping that they've, had to really have a lot of cognitive dissonance around in order to warp reality far enough to make this continue to make sense. It becomes harder and harder and harder for them to backpedal and backtrack from that. And I think that's really kind of the heart of what's going on, is that the people who are still super on the Trump train are people who have gone far beyond any kind of moral framework for what he's doing, because they've had to abandon little aspects of their sort of psyche along the way, and it's not too crazy to say they're brainwashed. I mean, they've done it to themselves largely. It's a voluntary process as far as I can tell, but it's very persistent. And so when you have people who have, put all this effort in, they just burn too many calories. That's what it kind of comes down to, and they can't let it go.
Outside of QAnon, one of the things that they find attractive about Trump is that he kind of, he's so bombastic and he's just such an asshole, that he kind of embodies this really toxic form of masculinity. I mean, he kind of just portrays that, like, this is the way a man is supposed to be. And you have all these wannabes, they all want to be alpha type guys that buy into that.
I think another big part of it is that social media creates echo chambers where the news that we're seeing is not the news that they're seeing.
Oh, yeah, that's for sure true.
You start reading into the QAnon stuff, you're going to get fed more QAnon stuff by the internet. And so you just start drifting further and further away from ever hearing this sort of stuff that we're hearing, that leads us to, think that Trump's an evil person.
It's sort of. Oh, sorry.
Any news to the contrary that says that Trump is not a good person just gets filtered out for them.
Well, the thing that's messed up is that because of all those damned algorithms, literally Google, Facebook, and everything actually feeds into that. So you don't even have to go out of your way to insulate yourself. The whole fucking system we're using does that for you. It decides, it figures out whether you're left, right, center, whatever you are, and then focuses different information toward you, which basically, it's self-fulfilling. It's you don't have to be goal seeking. The information is fed to you in a way that already is.
Well, like, yeah, if I just watch one or two videos that are from the far right, YouTube will put in recommendations, and they'll put on the homepage just video after video after video of more of the same.
Right.
I mean, and in a way, that kind of system, I mean, from a business, from a corporate perspective, makes a lot of sense. You've watched, A, B, and C. You're going to be interested in D, E, and F. So we're going to make sure you don't have to look for it. We're going to put it right in your face to keep your eyes on us, because that's what they're after, is the amount of time your eyes are on the screen.
Right.
So that's why they do that. And yeah, I mean, the back end of that ends up being all you ever see, are the things that you initially looked at.
Yeah, it's a feedback.
Yeah, after a long enough time, you can believe that the world is like extremely dystopian.
Yeah, it's definitely a feedback loop. And well, for instance, to Kazuma's point, one guilty pleasure of mine is I like watching First Amendment audits. Because they're basically they're basically what they're doing is it's kind of provocative. What they do is they go and film government buildings, all these. Basically, they're most of them, those ones that know what they're doing, are following the law, but it's all stuff that makes people nervous and that people call the cops, and then it's to basically kind of show the cops, well, yes, people might feel uncomfortable about this, but we're not breaking the law, and you can't violate my rights. You have to let me do what I'm doing, even if it makes people uncomfortable. So I'm, as somebody who definitely feels the cops need to be challenged, every day and often, and every possibility. So I tend to watch this stuff. But the people who do it tend to be right wing, and I see in the comments, I can tell because they're always going off about, they're attacking BLM and they're attacking Antifa and all this kind of stuff. But because I watch these videos lately, I've been getting this stream of other right-wing bullshit fed into my YouTube feed, and they're like, no, go away. Just because I want the cops held accountable doesn't mean I'm pro, right wing.
Paul, did you want to say something?
Well, yeah, I just want to say something real quick. I get disturbed. We were talking a moment ago about how, if you watch these things and a whole bunch more things will get recommended and whatever. I get quite disturbed by the presumption behind AI that it knows what I want or don't want to see. Because that doesn't necessarily, I understand how the algorithm works, or why it works the way it works, and it does tend to show you stuff that you might want to see, maybe. But I get the same thing with Spotify, where they decide what kind of music I might want to listen to because I've listened to other stuff. And it's this AI, there's an awful lot of assumptions built into the way AI works that I think that, actual head meat doesn't work that way. And I don't necessarily think it does us a lot of favors. I'm sure sometimes for some people it's more convenient, but I don't know. I'm just automatically bothered by and suspicious of technology or people behind it trying to figure me out. I don't like to be figured out. The
thing about it is that, well, it's definitely the people behind it. It's not the technology, because the technology is agnostic. It's not thinking anything. It's doing calculations based on probabilities. And the fact of the matter is, as much as we all hate to admit it, most of us are predictable in certain ways if they know enough basic information about us. But the thing is the sad part of it is because what Rob was talking about the algorithm is that, it makes sense from a perspective of someone selling a product. Oh, Joe looks at Rockwell website and GE websites. He's interested in industrial controls. And I get all sorts of ads for products related to my business because I visit sites that support that stuff all the time. But the thing that's messed up on social media is we are the product. So what they're doing there is they're actually they're trying to keep us fixated because the more views we give to the content, and the more clicks we give to the content, the more money Facebook, YouTube, whatever makes. So it's not there to help in that regard. At least on those instances, it's not there to help us, because whether or not I see an article that mollifies my view of the world, that doesn't make my life better, but it sure as hell makes money for Facebook and for YouTube.
Well, I got to add that. Sorry, Deb.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say I do appreciate the algorithms when it comes to music, though, because on YouTube I've found so many new artists that I really love via those algorithms. So.
Okay, so going back to Trump and masculinity.
I have to object right here. Just not to anybody in person, but I just want to say that there is nothing about him that is like an actual alpha male. People who think that is representation of an alpha male do not know anything about what the word alpha means. In my humble opinion,
he's the weakest, most thin-skinned, scared coward I've ever seen in my whole life.
Every dude that I know in real life that holds jobs and positions of power and influence are nothing like he behaves. They tend to be relatively quiet and listen a lot. They sometimes can be hard to be persuaded, but it is possible to persuade them. They're not just like irrevocably, they're just not entrenched in a thing. They tend to not raise their voices and yell at people a lot. They tend to, have sophisticated communication. A lot of things, but nothing like Trump. And
well, in nature, the alpha male is the one that the females want the most. It's not the toughest one or the strongest one. It's the ones that get to breed the most. That's what the alpha is out there in Lion Kingdom or whatever, So I kind of find it amusing when people think that, tough and abrasive equals alpha.
I guess
more often than not, it just equals a chauvinist,
Well, I guess that, for me, my perspective on that, right, is that tough and abrasive because it is correlating to powerful, and then powerful, of course, is correlated to ideas like can protect house and home, it can provide for family, can go hunt or whatever. But I guess that ultimately, if you look at all the course of history, right, humans are the alpha predators on this planet, not because of our physicality, but because of our intellect. It is because we are smarter than everything else. So when you look at what constitutes
and our ability to collaborate.
Yes,
right.
An actual alpha ability, it is not in how strong somebody is. It is in how fucking smart they are and what their capabilities in that realm are, because always ultimately the battle is going to be won by the intelligence, and the intelligence is going to be able to control the hammer, right? The hammer has its power, but somebody's going to wield it, and it's that person that is truly the powerful person, right? So I just never understand why people see him as and I don't understand why people see. Maybe I do. I have a theory on it. My theory is
on HBO Max right now. There's a movie called Class Action Park. Have you heard about this movie, Class Action Park? It's a documentary.
I have not.
It's about the amusement park, Action Park, and that amusement park is right in my hometown. I can go outside and throw a rock and hit it.
Anyway, have not heard of it. What's it about?
Everybody in this town worked for the park at one point or another.
Oh, Action Park, yeah.
And Action Park was the most dangerous amusement park in the country. And all kinds of people died there. There was injuries every day. The park actually had to buy ambulances
What is the premise of the park? I don't know what you're talking about. So I've
The
never.
water park.
It's an amusement park. So yeah,
Okay.
a water park. Their slogan was "You control the action," and it kind of prospered on this idea of you're in control of the rides. Like there's no seat belts. You're not hooked to a track. You can do basically whatever you want, and they're very, very dangerous rides. I mean, very, very dangerous.
I was hurt 4 times in one day, including almost drowning in the wave pool.
Yeah. And the wave pool, I mean, because it's a freshwater wave pool, the waves are crazy. You don't get any buoyancy. If you were in a saltwater pool, you'd be some buoyancy and it's less dangerous. But it's a freshwater wave pool with massive hurricane type waves.
Yeah.
So anyway, so this HBO released this documentary like last week. A guy that I went to school with from like first grade on, who still lives in town or lives nearby anyway, whose father was one of the founders of the park, started a group on Facebook called Action Park Alumni. And he added me to the group because I was a former employee. So, I mean, it's mostly men. There's a lot of names on there I remember. And I'm like, oh, I know that person, right? So there's a thread about somebody who worked at the park complaining that the documentary is toxic, and it's a toxic celebration of the guy who built the park, the brains behind it. And by the way, Trump was asked to invest in this park, and it was even too crazy for him. He's like, yeah, no, it was just too crazy for him. He wouldn't even invest in it. So anyway, on this thread, the original poster said it's the same kind of person who would describe being a man as toxic masculinity, because everyone knows that being strong and working hard and having guns and being a protector is bad in America now. It must have been some lady boy.
Wow. So along these same lines, I think it's kind of funny when you look at like incels and MRAs and that whole category of loser. They all think they call anyone who isn't them, who basically doesn't try to diminish women and doesn't seem to have a problem with women, that the rest of we're all cucks and we're all betas and all that. And I'm like, I remember one even telling me that I'm supposedly a beta, and me and my kind, we're betas because we do whatever women want so we can get sex. And I was like, if we're the ones getting sex, that literally means we're not the betas. Because getting to get the sex is a thing, then yeah, we won the genetic lottery. And I actually, to Sister Danger's point, I think that's actually why over the last probably 30 years now, really early started in the early 90s, when and I guess as women got more and more power within society, and so that the male kind of presented idea of masculinity and being that ooga booga, I'm gonna hit her over the head and drag her off by her hair crap started to fade as women got more power. Where did they go? So that's when geek culture started becoming more acceptable and even prized within the society, because somewhere along, of course, women, if they're looking for provider is someone who can get a good job and provide for the family. Not we don't live in a society where we have to go out and spear dinner.
Right.
But if you have a good education and a good job, you're going to be doing a lot better than that guy that's trying to hunt dinner, shoot or try to blow up, catch fish with a grenade or some bullshit like that.
Yeah, I mean, I ended up leaving the group because I was just like, number one, I'm not going to engage these assholes, number one. And number two, they're exactly displaying the exact thing that toxic masculinity is by complaining about it.
Right.
And the definition of masculinity, I mean, okay, so working hard, so what, women don't work hard? Owning guns, so women can't have guns?
Well, and that's another one too, though. The whole idea that having guns is a sign that you're strong is like completely horseshit. I mean, I had a guy about a year ago. We were having this conversation, and he was kind of stunned at my attitude about guns, and he was like, "Whoa, how do you defend yourself?" I'm like, "From what, motherfucker? What? I'm 51, never needed a gun in my whole life." So, but you sit there and cower, and you're like, "Oh, I gotta have my guns." Which of us is the stronger person? I'm betting on me.
My main issue with like the Trump type of stereotype for what masculinity is how he can never admit when he's wrong. He can never ask for advice from other people. No, he has to know it all, and it's just like, yeah, people don't really look up to that. That's not a anyway. Yeah, it's the element of never being able to admit when he's wrong. That's my biggest issue.
He knows more than the experts. Yeah, no one knows more than this than they. Literally every topic that ever comes up.
Yeah, yes, he's more bigly than everybody. I looked that word up. It's not actually a word, guys. It's a dictionary fallacy.
It's not. You say it.
No, I think that
I say.
What?
Kofefi, I say.
Yes. I guess that I agree with Kazoom, and I find that people that don't have the ability to do those things, to ask for advice, to recognize if they're wrong and then correct their stance or anything, just whatever that may be. I mean, sometimes I've seen people say like, "Oh yeah, you're totally right," but I still think what I think. I mean, okay, but at least like, at least you think what my cat's making.
Well, and basically, someone like Trump is so weak because basically he's inadequate. He knows he's inadequate, but he can't cope with that. And instead of trying to change himself to become more adequate, what he does is he wants to destroy anything that points out his inadequacy. So, he denigrates everybody around him, even people on his side, people that are loyal to him. He denigrates them in public, which is horrible.
The thing is that people who can't do that, right? The reason that they don't do it is because they don't want to be embarrassed by having been wrong or having been shown to not know something as completely as they did. And the thing is that if that makes you feel embarrassed, that means that you have a point of self-confidence or esteem issues that are going on. And that is exactly the type of thing that indicates basically weakness ultimately. So,
well, I mean, it's extremely childish. I mean, these guys, speaking from somebody who like,
I hate to call it weakness too, by the way, because I don't think that people having self-confidence issues makes them weak. I think that people avoiding things in real life and never acknowledging that they feel the way they do, that might be a little more like you're kind of you need to like recognize the thing and then like
it's immaturity.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Immaturity is a better word. And this is
why it's immature. Speaking from somebody who's a male who never fit in with the guys. Yeah. Never, ever. I was never part of the in-group. Always seen as like weak and soft and the whole thing, and like just kind of pushed aside and teased and picked on and bullied. These guys, this group, before they're even in school, they're socialized about what's weak, and what's strong and how you act, and about self-defense and all of it. So when they get together in a group, whoever ends up being perceived as the strongest is the leader. Everyone else then is in fear of him and does whatever they have to do to back him up or stay in his good graces. And it starts at the very beginning of school. And they follow that because I've seen it, right? Yeah, King of the Hill. They follow it all the way through. They follow all the way through high school. And by the time they get out of high school, now these are adult men who have the maturity when it comes to like strength and that kind of stuff of a 4-year-old, because that's when it started.
And that's also why when most bullies back down when you step up to them, because they're not used to that. Because basically, everyone they were kind of recognized as the tough one, the strong one, whatever, and all their toadies just do whatever they tell them to.
I mean, it depends on where you're coming from, but because the school I went to, the stand up to the bully trope, especially in the late 70s, early 80s, that did not work. Not in England. No. But
well, yeah, you're right, depending on where you are.
Yeah.
Some schools you might get shot, but
but here's the dynamic.
What's going on isn't just that, like I don't think Trump has shame. I don't think he has embarrassment. I think he's much more into the spectrum of sociopathy, where he doesn't acknowledge other people's reality or existence. He's not covering for things he doesn't understand or doesn't know very well, for other people's benefit. It's definitely, from my perception, it's his own benefit that he's doing that, and he's doing it because he's constantly rewriting his own story at every given moment, and his story to himself is the only, like, he's the storyteller and he's the audience for that story. No one else exists. And so sort of the way he revises things, I mean, as far as I can tell, he thinks of his entire timeline, his life story, as he doesn't have past, he doesn't have future, he certainly doesn't have planning. And it is, when we said earlier that there's something childlike about Trump, and he's what, 72 years old. I don't expect change. Any expectation that he grows out of this, it's too late for that. But he's operating the way a 4-year-old operates, with that type of sociopathy of believing in the center of the universe.
Well, I mean, especially a guy.
Wait. Just let me jump in real quick, Rob, real quick, because just to the point Jack just made. I recently acquired 4 new grandchildren because I now have a new partner, and there's 3 girls and a boy, and the boy's a newborn. But the second oldest girl, she was bragging to me about a present that she got for her birthday, and she kept on saying, "This is mine, me," and then saying her name, right, like over and over again. And I thought, that's such a cute little 5-year-old thing, like when you say this is mine, I already know you're talking about yourself. You don't have to tell me your name as well. But it's like a kid thing. And then, like, literally I come back to home, and then I'm looking at the news the other day, and Trump says in a tweet, he's like, "Your favorite president, me."
Yeah.
I automatically thought of my 5-year-old granddaughter, and like, because she did the exact same thing.
For most people, they're socialized with those, that kind of men, I shouldn't say guys, men, little boys are socialized with that, whole strength thing and what makes you strong. But then they meet the real world very soon after. I mean, they go to school. There's other people they run into. When they're young teenagers, they get jobs, and then they're driving. And as the world opens up, and they incorporate all of this new stuff, into their personality, and it changes a lot of that socializing. Although it's never really completely gone, it gets diluted with new information and new things and new points of view. Trump lived a life where he was isolated. So that 4-year-old kind of sociology is still there. It's still basically fresh because nothing has ever diluted it.
Yeah.
And that was his money.
Mary Trump said that in their book.
Oh, did she?
Well, yeah, and that's the thing that gets me with him and it's one of the reasons why I think that
trauma.
He likes guys like Kim Jong-un, because it's the exact same thing. He's got to have the news that everything that happens, he invented it. So yes, the sport we've been playing for 70 years, he invented it before he was even born. But that's how it's got to be. That we have to rewrite, because he has to be the number one thing of every story. You can't even have anyone he can even like give props to, because that would say that somebody else did something better than him.
And I mean, even with the Russia thing, I mean, Putin perfectly fits the mold of what Donald Trump would think is an alpha. From Donald Trump's perspective, Putin doesn't give a shit what people say. He doesn't care what they think. If he wants another country, he's just going to march his army in and take it, because he's a man.
He kills his adversaries.
I mean, yeah, from Trump's perspective, that's a man. That's an alpha.
And that's what makes
not only
Trump so
that,
dangerous, because
sort of a father figure in Putin for Trump. I see a very much like the way he talks about Trump is the way somebody might talk about a father or a respected uncle.
Well, and that's what makes Trump so dangerous,
Revert
and
that.
why, to me,
Trump said
so
about
critical that he gets voted out, because if he gets reelected, he will take this as a sign that, hey, everyone's okay with me, and I can be like, I can get away with being like Putin now. I can kill my adversaries, and I can jail journalists and do all this other kind of shit. He's been putting the feelers out for this for quite a while. He wants to be like Putin.
Well, how do you feel about the recently leaked where Trump has basically said disparaging things about the military?
Well, I mean, the thing is, it's not the first time, though. That's why I laugh at his supporters are trying to hide it, because he literally said this shit the whole time he's been there.
I mean, there's
Yeah, especially like John McCain, the stuff he said about John McCain, and then he tries to deny, and it's just like, there's proof that you said this, Trump.
Gold Star
a minimum of 2 veterans. There's a minimum. I don't know if anybody else was in the service, but there's 2 veterans on the panel. So go ahead, Michael.
So the timeliness of this coming out is for those troops who are getting their absentee ballot overseas. They're deployed, and they're getting their ballots right about now. So this story was going to happen whether or not there was a new thing that he said about the troops, or just old things that were being dredged up. This story had to happen this week to hit this way, so that it would reach the troops who are voting, because half of them are voting absentee. So they're filling it out right this week. The first batch of absentee ballots just got mailed.
This is the first time that the military polling shows heavily leaning Democrat, which is very uncommon, and that's something that I'm sure is going to frustrate Trump quite a bit. Just to know that the typically bedrock solid Republican support of the military won't actually be supporting him.
It had been drifting leftward for a while. So, I mean, with or without, like this latest thing.
7 wars will do that.
Yeah, I mean, this
pisses me off about the whole military thing is that this is the thing that is causing, it is making the military, explode. Right? This is it, that he came out and insulted you. It didn't matter when he was pussy grabbing people, and it didn't matter when he destroyed the post office or was attempting to destroy the post office, and it didn't matter when he's trying to fuck up your rights to vote. It didn't matter when he's taking away Social Security, right? None of that mattered. But he's like, hey, you guys are losers and suckers. And now they're like, that's beyond the pale.
In defense of the military. All of those other things that you talked about, there are avenues within the government. There are structures, there are processes, there's everything else in the government to handle all that stuff. And some of that's going to come down to voting. But when you say that the people in the military are suckers and losers and you're the commander in chief, one of the thought processes is you're sitting in your chair, and that building that you're sitting in even exists because losers and suckers like me are willing to die to keep you there. So that's why.
I get it. I'm just saying, like that.
I mean, that's what they're thinking. They're looking at him, going, "Dude, we're ready to."
The thing about it, though, is that they aren't angry about it until now. It's them. Right? It's just like anti-maskers, right? They're all fucking, I'm not going to wear my mask. I don't give a fuck about you weaklings over there who are cowed into believing it's a thing, right? They don't care. But then somebody in their family gets COVID and they're like, oh, maybe wear a mask, guys. Now I care because it was me. But I couldn't be bothered to care about that issue until it was me, right?
That's right-wing thinking in general, right?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. That's right-wing thinking in general.
I didn't like gay people until I had a gay daughter, says Dick Cheney. It's just
exactly. That's literally they do not have empathy for anyone outside their group, and that's why they're right-wing. That's literally what draws them to it. It's not that right-wing thinking makes them think that way. People that think that way are drawn to that kind of thing, right-wing thinking. But it goes even further. I was watching a video was Bo of the Fifth Column. His point was it wasn't even so much that they insulted the active military, is that Trump was attacking the war dead. And for Marines, but especially, is like, okay, these are our metaphorical ancestors, you know, our spiritual ancestors in the military, and that's something they take ultra seriously. That's more important than anything to them.
Never leave a man behind.
Exactly. So that to the kind of the core of makes them want to be military.
Stars and Stripes. That was another thing that he did just this last week, was wants to take away all the funding for the Stars and Stripes military newsletter.
One of the things that he said too was about like POWs. What, it didn't make any sense to him to spend money to look for POWs to try to bring them back. And it's just like, dude, you're the commander in chief. What message are you saying to your troops, right? I mean, when he was elected, my generals, my army, my military. It's your military, right? You're the guy with
he wanted a parade.
And he wanted a parade with your finger on the button. And now you're telling your soldiers that if they get captured, you're not even going to bother to try and find them. You're not going to try and save them. They just go out. They're losers. That's what you're telling them. That's what you want the military to know when they go off carrying guns for you. Okay, that makes sense.
Did you see Sully Sullenberger's comments that came out yesterday?
Who?
Sully Sullenberger, Captain Sullenberger, the one that landed the plane in the Hudson.
The
airline
pilot.
You don't remember
what was said?
Well, basically, I mean, he said, "Look, I'm not normally political, and I normally stay out of this and kind of keep my opinions to myself." But he basically, you know, to sum up, was that Trump doesn't understand, serving something bigger than him because he doesn't think there is anything bigger than him, and Trump doesn't understand courage because he's a coward. And he said, "Look, we have to put all our other bullshit aside and vote him out. We just have to, because he's basically disparaged the country, the history of the country, all of its institutions, all of its artifices, all of its structure, the whole structure, what makes it work, because he doesn't care about any of it."
On that topic, I'm increasingly worried about, or just worried is not quite the right word, because I've been worried for a decade about our democracy or longer. But this does feel like we're at a point where, sure, Princeton said in 2014 that America is not effectively a democracy, according to their broad-based study. And I haven't really, seen ads that the United States operates as a republic or democracy in most of my lifetime, honestly. But this is a strikingly different kind of character to an election season, where it does feel like, and in some ways, fortunately, maybe Trump has pissed off the military, because if he has to have somebody in his back pocket to help him produce a coup, he might not have as much support as he thinks he does. But it is, even with Bush, who I thought was really a bad president, I mean, just, the worst possible, turned out,
George Bush was
hilariously statesman-like in comparison.
Oh, well, what comes right down
Bush was a warmonger for sure, but I mean, Trump is just straight up fascist. I mean, right now in Kentucky, there's armed militias on both sides facing each other off, with cops in the middle and peaceful protesters also in the middle. And this shouldn't be happening in these United States of America. And and not that everything that goes wrong in America is Trump's fault by any stretch of the imagination. And believe me, the racial tensions that were boiling up, which has caused all the movement that's happening in terms of protests this year, needed to happen. And I don't know if it would have had the catalyst if it wasn't for the COVID interruption in everyone's lives, which made people have to pay attention, because they didn't have anything else they were paying attention to for once. And also the fact that Trump has basically just said to a lot of us,
Yeah.
deliberately trying to classify protest as rebellion.
Right.
And that can't last. And the protesters with the guns, sorry, I just want to finish in Louisville today, they were there specifically to turn peaceful protesters away. They didn't want the protests to happen. They wanted everybody to go home. And, you know, thankfully, I can't even believe I'm saying this, but they weren't the only ones with guns there. You know, because there was a standoff, and I don't think the last thing I noticed anyway, so far no one's been seriously hurt or anything like that, but it's a volatile situation, and that's sort of a metaphor for the whole country right now.
Yeah.
I mean,
What I worry about right now is if the violent elements of the protest, the rioting and the looting and in some cases even murder, if this stuff continues and the Democratic leadership doesn't try to do anything about it, I worry that Kyle Rittenhouse could be just the tip of the iceberg for the reaction that we're going to see out of this. I worry that there's going to be basically a boogaloo.
well,
I want to be clear about something real quick.
The thing is, though, is whether or not, I mean, because Biden's already on multiple occasions now come out against, you know, violence on all sides, including on the BLM side. So it doesn't matter. They're going to do what they're going to do. The other side's going to do what they're going to do. They're going to gin up whatever they can. We know this because, as Paul has pointed out, and we have proof for it, we know there are basically agent provocateurs causing trouble and trying to basically pretend to be BLM side to try to bring out a violent response or justify a violent response. But real quick, just to Geek's point about George Bush, is that the difference between George Bush and Trump is that as horrible of a president as George Bush was, didn't know how to be president, didn't know what to do, his policies sucked. George Bush cared about America. Didn't know what to do to make it better. Had, you know, everything he did was kind of destructive and stupid, but he actually wanted America to get better. And Trump doesn't give a fuck.
So
Trump only cares about his base.
Himself. He doesn't care about his base. He cares about himself, and and the only reason he shows any kind of care for his base is because his base cares about him. So, right. So I think that it's in how do you fight back against the police and provocateur agents? How do you fight back against that when they're the ones who are making the riots constantly? If all you have to do is just tear yourself away from a TV screen and mainstream media for 2 seconds and just go watch the plethora of videos that are live streams from people across this nation over and over and over, every time they are peacefully protesting, and then the cops arrive, and then the tear gas starts, and then they're like, oh, this is an illegal assembly of people, everybody move, and then they push people because in a big crowd of people, I can only back up so far when I've got 300 people behind me. I have to wait for those people to move, but then the cops start pushing, and when those people aren't moving because they can't, then they're like, oh, we declare this a riot, and then they start firing on them every time. It freaking happens.
It's a setup,
there's a lot of footage of. It's not it's not the other side feigning. There is a lot of footage of the Antifa and BLM actually starting some of the rioting. There's footage of them trying to start fires. There's lots of footage all the way around.
I don't dispute that there may or may not be footage like that, but I don't get to check their ID. Do you? I mean, just saying. For one thing, I wanted to say something else about Sister Danger's point a moment ago. Shit, now I can't remember what it was. Never mind.
I just want to say one thing, that the concern I had, what I brought up there, isn't about the fact that there's a bunch of violence in the street. That's not new in America. And the election of 1800 had death and right. You had not just the Second Civil War in the United States, that was essentially between hired mine owner thugs and mine workers. One of the largest battles between two factions in the U.S. was, something like 1,800 or 2,000 people shooting at each other on each side. We have, a whole history of strikes where cops are killing people, and strikers are also killing bosses in occasion. It's not so much the violence that I'm talking about that is different about this election, because every one of these other situations occurred and there was still a peaceful transition of power.
Right.
We had, this country has been very violent. We've had much worse. I mean, America just got familiarized with Tulsa in 1921, and that's not the only time, Americans have dropped bombs on other Americans, with airplanes. There's obviously the MOVE bombing in 1985. There's all these different situations that have, far worse and more, cost of life and property in the U.S. But we've never had, to my knowledge, and I'm not, a historian or anything, but my relatively decent look into presidential history, I've never seen a president who is as eager to abandon the entire tradition of the peaceful transition of power as this particular president is. And I think that's the difference in character that I'm trying to bring up.
One thing you have to be careful with some of the footage, Kazum, is like there is a piece of video floating around the last couple of days, I think maybe just today, that's showing a bunch of guys on the roof of somebody's house. And the caption says, Black Lives Matter protesters are now climbing up on
Miles Tom's caption.
Yeah, right? I mean, and
No.
the guy who recorded the video had to correct it and say, no, these people are on their own roof. They're shouting out support to the protesters. So some of what you're seeing out there, people are saying, look at Black Lives Matter starting fires in dumpsters. Well, how do you know they're Black Lives Matter?
Well, also, quite frankly, starting a fire in a dumpster is
How do you know they started the fire and that it wasn't already going when the picture was put it out? I mean,
no, but say, for sake of argument, let's say that someone did. Of all the things people can do, setting a fire, or setting a literal dumpster fire, it's obnoxious. But I mean, and again, I've had this meme and I've reposted it a couple times because I love it. It's like, why is it that killing people, violence against someone for property damage is okay, but not the other way around. So you can kill people because, they might have something or they might break something, but if someone's from getting killed, why is it wrong to fight back, in kind? I mean, and the thing is, because the thing is also that violence you're talking about is not new. Go back and look at the entire 50s and 60s, all the water cannons and the dogs and everything like that. People have, unfortunately, we've had this myth, white people have perpetrated on Martin Luther King, that because he was for nonviolence, that, everyone just kind of stood on the side of the road and went, oh, help us. And that's bullshit. Like I brought up before, the Montgomery, the boycott of the lunch counters. They went and they sat and they were press trapping, and they went and they sat in people's businesses and said, fuck you. If we can't sit here and eat, no one will. They blocked bridges. They did all sorts of stuff. And white people hated it too at the time. And they sicked dogs on people and water cannons and did all sorts of heinous stuff. We've been going through this stuff long before I was born and long before my siblings and my father and all that were born. This is not new. And I'm personally, like, I don't give a fuck about a dumpster fire. I really don't. Destroying somebody else's business, yeah, I'm not cool. I'm not really cool with that. But as that one black woman a few months ago said, because somebody asked her, "Oh, you guys are destroying your own neighborhood," and she's like, "No, we're not. This isn't ours. We don't own any of this fucking stuff. These are people coming in from outside."
Target's not a small business.
That's right. People are coming in here from outside the neighborhood, putting a business, taking money out of the community. They don't put anything back into the community, and then they're all living off. They don't live here. They live somewhere else. And that's why we have nothing. This is the same problem that they had in India with one of the things that led to the revolution there, is that basically British business usurped local industry. So people were not buying local, and they were basically sending all their money out of the country. Same thing happened in parts of Africa. So that's why in India, the Gandhi had the spinning wheel be the symbol of the country, because the idea was that it's better to wear a piece of homespun that supports our local community than it is than any fine fabric that came out of Leeds.
I just know that if I was at a protest and I started seeing people become violent and destroy property and destroy someone's business, I would either try to report it or I would just leave. I wouldn't want to be associated with that. And one of the problems with when police or any other law enforcement tries to go after the people that are actually doing the looting and the rioting is it can be hard for them to tell the difference between the people that are just peaceful and the people that are actually rioting, because some of the people that are peaceful are kind of giving cover for the people who are violent.
They're shooting even when but even when there's no violence, they still shoot at people, though. That's my whole point. They shoot at people anyway. They don't discriminate. They can't discriminate because they don't try to.
I'm in Portland. I went to several of these protests, 3 or 4 days of these protests. Now, I wasn't near the violence particularly, if it was even violence on those particular nights. But it doesn't matter, because I'm a BLM supporter who lives in Portland, Oregon. And when I'm on Twitter, every single person who I argue with goes to my profile and goes, "Aha! BLM supporter from Portland. Well, your opinion means nothing. You support burning down businesses." Do I support burning down businesses? So it doesn't matter if I support burning down businesses or not. My proximity to it is enough. And there could be significantly less, because this really isn't in the real grand scheme of things. And what I said earlier about the U.S.'s history of warfare and violence this is literally nothing in the grand scheme of American violence. And any tiny bit, a dumpster on fire will be blown as far out of proportion as it possibly can be to make the exact point that BLM is a violent movement and Antifa are a bunch of thugs. It doesn't matter if it was, a flaming teddy bear in a gutter. You could get a zillion cameras around it to show just how terrible all of the BLM supporters are. So I just don't think that there's any managing that in terms of how do you push back on the idea that, even the slightest standing outside of the social norms or the social contract is enough to label a movement violent. I don't think you deal with that. So I think you do have to tackle the fact that violence is just a part of the deal in America head on and go, let's be realistic. What's actually violent? Is it Target, being looted, or Gucci, or, an AutoZone burned down? Or is it, 1,100 people a year being killed by police, when the job of police is to bring you in alive so you can face a jury of your peers in a ostensibly civilized legal system. They are not juries, they're not executioners, they're not judges. And I really think that has to be the point, because the violence we're just a violent country. It's just going to happen. Anyway,
that-
that's my piece.
I don't want to ever get acclimatized to a culture of violence. I think that would be a big mistake to even contemplate that. There's a lot to unpack with what you just said, and I'm not even going to go into all of it because I've been trying to hold on to the thoughts from a few chains ago. A moment ago, I put up a comment by Phoenix Rider and another one by Deep Ashtray, who are both intimating about the cyber warfare that's a constant for probably the last 20 years, but it's especially bad in the past 10 years or so. And Jack, what you were just saying a moment ago about how everything gets over amplified, that feeds all the way into this. And I think everybody on the streets and all of us who are staying at home, lockdown or whatever, we're fed all this stuff, and it's, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance, right? I mean, really, that's what I really wanted to say to your overall point. What can you do about it? Be careful, be astute, pay attention, try not to be fooled, because there's memes out there that are trying to fool us all. And there's all kinds of fucking misinformation advertisement that's going on every single day. Some of it is targeted directly at you. You can count on it. So be aware, be astute.
I just want to make a point related to what we've just been talking about just directly. So to give it a very good parallel analogy is the Palestine-Israel peace accord, the Oslo Accord that fell apart. So what had happened was, obviously, back in the 90s, Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat, they came to an accommodation and they signed a peace accord, and things were doing fairly well. However, when the government changed, when Netanyahu came in for the first time, and this is the reason why I blame him for the current state of affairs for what's happened in the last 25 years, because he's a thug. But basically, his government took the position that any violence by any Palestinian against any Israeli, this was going to be seen as an abrogation of the treaty. So all it took was just one. Didn't matter whether they were associated with the PLO, whether they were associated with Hamas or any of those groups. It didn't matter. One person doing something wrong, and that's it. And they did that on purpose, though, because they knew that there were splitters, there were extremists within the PLO, Hamas, all these different groups that didn't want peace, that really just wanted to push the Israelis into the sea. Now they're not on the side of Israel, they're not on the side of their fellow Palestinians either. So what they did was, basically, so what happened is every single time some element of violence would happen, it didn't matter how much the Palestinians said, hey, we're not for that, we don't sanction that, we're against it. Israel took that as license to go and bomb some Palestinians, knock over some houses, commit some other atrocities, and all because a small number of people. So you cannot police every single person. And this is the problem we have in general, is you say, okay, we're going to look at the extreme of any movement, and we're going to project that upon everybody and say, well, if anybody who even remotely is similar to you does anything wrong, you're all fucked. And this is what happens, again, black people in America, because this is always happening. So I get followed around in stores because some black people steal some shit. Of course, some white people steal some shit too, but white people don't get followed around fucking stores. But everywhere I go, it doesn't matter how much money I make, I get treated like a fucking criminal because someone who's superficially like me does something wrong. And so white Americans are perfectly fine judging every black person by the ills of a few. But they get mad when we say don't judge the police by the actions of a few, even though it's really not a few, because if it was, it would stop, because most of it at least would be stopped by the good apples around. And
Also,
if it was, these riots wouldn't be going on for fucking over 100 days.
Is your name Jack? What Jack had said earlier about 1921 Tulsa. Most Americans had no fucking clue that even happened. Major violence, over 100 people killed, businesses bombed, burned out. Where was America then? America didn't give a fuck, not so much that we didn't even teach it in schools.
What are we talking about?
30 square
I think
Worrying about
level.
people are upset about a little bit of violence. Wake the fuck up, America, and get on the fucking program. I am fucking so done with this shit. I don't give a fuck. I really don't care, because I'm sick and tired of being a fucking target. I'm sick and tired of being treated like a fucking criminal. I'm sick and tired of being treated like a fucking suspect walking out of my goddamn house. So if somebody burns a fucking garbage can, big fucking deal. stop burning our shit down, and maybe this won't happen back.
I want to make sure that we're all speaking about this dumpster fire in the same context. Are we talking about the one that Kyle Rittenhouse put out?
No, I think the dumpster fire was just an example that was used earlier as.
Are we all aware that one of the things that preceded that shooting with Kyle Rittenhouse was that the protesters had lit a dumpster fire and he ran over there to put it out with a fire extinguisher, and that's why the original man was chasing him, and then he turned around and shot him. Are we aware of this?
I was not aware of that, but I don't think it's relevant to how the term dumpster fire was being used in this conversation.
In listening to the way people are describing how it doesn't matter, I feel like it's very prescient for me to bring this up, because what we're saying could be used and then put against that context where it did matter in that moment, because he was actually trying to put out that dumpster fire, and when he did that, he pissed off the protesters by doing the civic duty thing.
Right.
Yeah, like he's not the fire department.
I mean, of course, before that, he was over there the girl from the back of the head. So, I mean, it's kind of a where do you want to start the chain of events?
No, this was actually the immediate preceding thing was he put out a dumpster fire, literally, and
then and shot somebody.
Also,
the person that was chasing him was angry about him putting out the dumpster fire.
Yeah, but shot them.
I want to do something that Paul said too. Paul said we can't get normalized to violence. America's always been normalized to violence. Are you kidding me? Look what happened to the Native Americans. Look what happened to minorities the whole time we're here.
I mean, we can have violence on TV and video games, but if you show a titty, woo!
We bomb brown people around the world. Violence is caused. We've been in how many wars since the country started?
Yeah. Well,
we've
had 15 years without war.
Until COVID, we had a school shooting, whatever, like every couple of weeks.
Jack, was it 17 years? Is that what you said? That's what it was,
16 right? Total years since the country was founded that we have not been at war. And that can be debated. There's some wars, Second Mexican-American War isn't necessarily classified, etc. But yes, we've consistently been at war for our entire history, save, the age of a child who can't yet vote. But I do want to say I am a pacifist. I'm not pro-violence. I'm very realistic about violence. Violence is simply a fact of American life. It has been for our entire history. We're not going to. It shouldn't be, but we also shouldn't have people living, in the streets and people starving and slave labor wages. Those
agreed.
Are simply facts of America as it currently exists, and I'm much more upset about the homeless than I am about, fires catching in dumpsters.
And I want to laugh. The 51st Stater says, it looks like I wouldn't do too well if the whole country was suddenly thrown in violence. It always has been. Oh, by the way, my nephew was shot and killed in October. So fuck you. Thrown into violence. Maybe, Matt, where you live, and not where I live, thankfully, but yeah, there's lots of violence in America.
So, do you think, though, that the people who need to hear the messages that our people are trying to convey are going to get the message through violence, or do you think they're going to just push away more because of the violence?
They pushed away at Colin Kaepernick for kneeling, and he was ostracized and basically blackballed from football because white audiences got upset because a guy kneeled, which is actually an act of supplication during their hallowed football game.
I'm just going to say,
yeah, and then Trump, and I agree, and then Trump sit there and criticized him for it too. So yeah.
Him kneeling was the peaceful protest.
Yeah.
They told everyone to get up, and now they're angry that we're up.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. That's the thing. There's never any form of protest. Well, just like a few years ago, BLM, Leon, I mentioned blocking bridges because that was actually something that was done. Ironically, the people that got all upset about blocking traffic, one of the bridges that was blocked was one that was blocked during the fucking 60s, during civil rights, because it was done on purpose to be symbolic. And, oh, Martin Luther King wouldn't do this. Like, assholes, he blocked this exact bridge. What the fuck are you talking about?
Literally yesterday in Everett, where I live, proper, there was a big BLM march, big, I guess, for the smaller town we're in, and there's all kinds of footage that, I mean, I wish I would have known this was actually happening yesterday, because I might have actually gone to this whole thing, but protesters were blocking the road, and this woman with her kid in her car literally drove into them, just slow. She drove up to them and then just kept driving and driving and driving until she was pushing against them. And so they went onto the hood of her car, and then she sped up, kept driving till a police car pulled in front of her. You can see all of this right on video. Police car pulls in front of her. She runs into the police car with people on her car that have like kind of fallen off to try to not be crushed while this is happening. And then the cops get out and arrest the protesters for disorderly conduct and allow her to leave and go home. No fucking joke. Like, what is going on even? And then people want to be like, oh, it's not the cops that are causing all. No, the hell it isn't. And our police up here are just notoriously bad.
Forces are the ones who burn crosses.
That's right. Thank you.
What? Say that again?
Some of those that work forces are the same that burn crosses.
It's just, it was a shocking thing.
Well, as we point, it's just like what we pointed out a few months ago. You know, somebody, some militia assholes don't want to wear a mask, and they show up to the state house with guns. Yeah. Implied threat that if the lawmakers don't change the policy, that they're there to kill lawmakers.
They literally busted into the state house in Boise, Idaho, with their guns for exactly that, and no
one was shot. And no one was shot.
Magically.
I saw a video the other day.
It was Idaho. There weren't any black people there.
He had a gun, and the cops are like trying their best to, like, you know, calm the guy down, and which is the right thing to do. That's what they should do. But again, you know, a guy walking away who may or may not have a knife in his car, shot in the back 7 times, versus a guy with an actual gun that somehow they seem to find the restraint to not shoot him. Which again, that's how it should be for everybody. But it's not.
If it's a white guy and he has a thermonuclear detonator in his car, they will find a way to bring him in alive because they respect his basic humanity.
To Kazum's point about he would just, you know, want to not be associated with the rioting if he saw it. There is a core group of protesters here in Denver that all still wear the Occupy Denver denim jackets that they all made for each other. It's like a handful of them. But if I see them show up to any sort of peaceful protest, I know they're going to try to start shit. And I know they're going to, like, take water bottles and throw it at the cops and try to piss them off to create a scene so that they can have footage of police brutality. I know that they're instigators, and I know that I do not need to be around them. And they are a reason why I won't participate in certain marches. Because if I see them marching, I know those motherfuckers are the ones that are always egging the cops on. And it does happen. But I one of them in particular, I've made videos about him on my YouTube channel. You couldn't pay somebody to be a better subversive agent against all progressive movements because he shows up to all of them and fucks them up. Right? And he's the one person in the world I wish I could just vote off the island. Like, off my planet. Off my fucking planet, right? Yeah, it does happen where I see it and I'm like, no, I don't want to be a part of it.
Hey, to play devil's advocate about being in a vehicle, I must admit that if I was trying to drive somewhere and there was suddenly a mob of people surrounding my car and they start pounding on the windows, I would probably drive very slowly through the area, and as soon as it seemed safe for me to drive faster, I would drive faster.
Well, at least in this case, that isn't what was happening. She had just pulled up to either a stop sign or a stoplight, and they were in the crosswalk area blocking the road, and they just wouldn't move when the light changed. And so she started driving into them. Like there was nobody touching her car until she drove physically into them. I'm like, that's vehicular assault. It is illegal.
Yeah.
Like, you're automatically in the wrong for that. And then
it's happening repeatedly where people are just driving their cars into these crowds. And it's not like they suddenly find themselves surrounded by people. They see the crowd. Either they see it while they're sitting at the light, or they'll see it from blocks away, depending on the size of the crowd.
I mean,
so there's not like, it's just not this, oh my God, all of a sudden, what am I going to do? It's no, I am going to drive through this crowd. If somebody dies, they die.
I kind of find it to be a weird situation, like, because, and to side actually a little bit with Kazum, is that if it were to have been the situation which you were describing, because I have seen that also in some of the protest videos where just riders will surround a person who happens to be stopped, and then they're just banging on the car, doing whatever, and it's crazy, and you're like, why is this happening? And I guess that if that was me inside the car, I would be pretty, I don't know exactly how I would react, because at that point, it's like they're physically aggressing you. They're going to damage your vehicle. They're going to break your windows. They're going to, maybe do something even more violent than that. And, you and anybody you may have in your car feel like you're the victims here. But boy, the yesterday thing, and it just tripped me out because it wasn't, the whole thing was caught on video, like from the beginning and by multiple sources. And it was just super crazy. But I mean, I do want to acknowledge though, that yes, there are different situations, and I would be pretty inclined to try to honk, to try to get the attention of authorities, and as a last resort, probably try to remove my vehicle from that area by driving very, very slow, so as to not hurt anybody, but also to not be hurt myself, right? So
yeah, those things happen, and it's obviously not in every case, because there are very few things in this world where it's in every case, but in many cases, when that happens, where all of a sudden there's a swarm around a car, they're going after a specific person. This might be somebody that they're protesting against, or maybe it's a CEO of a company that just allowed 40 million people to get poisoned or something, and protesters are angry. They'll go after his car and they'll surround his car. Usually when it's that kind of a thing where it's a swarm on a car instead of a car on a swarm, it's because they're protesting that person specifically. Usually, not always.
And certainly, I know if that was happening to me, it would be very concerning. I'd be afraid. I certainly would want to get out of there as quickly as possible. The one thing, I guess, where I feel like so many Americans do not understand our history, because one of the things that happened, like when the Stamp Act was passed, that mobs actually tarred and feathered some of the British merchants. And if you know anything about tarring and feathering, it sounds like in the cartoons, it's just like, oh, you're sticky, and they put no. They're putting hot pitch on you, burn your skin, and cause blisters, and may even kill you, and then throw feathering. This is what was done. So we have a history of this kind of thing, and we lionize and canonize all this stuff. Everything that was done to create this country, we think is great. And we'll every bit of violence, because look, certainly the British were wrong, but we did a lot of wrong too. But we kind of gloss over that because it's not pleasant, and we didn't have to look at it.
I think this goes back to the algorithm.
What do you all feel? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'll say real quick. Part of what we're talking about is the algorithms, because when I talk to somebody like on the other side, they can't believe that I haven't seen all the videos of Antifa violence. I'm on my feed, is filled with 600-700 videos of police violence. I do make a point of getting out of my bubble. It's one of the reasons I talk to these people, and I'm interested in their point of view. But there is that fact of the algorithms. You know, somebody who's following Andy No or Ian Miles Chong or something like that, like they are seeing video after video after video, often edited, as we know, you know, with both of those characters, Tim Pool videos, whatever, often edited in a way to, you know, exclude some of the detail, or, you know, the context. But they are seeing, you know, their entire feed is filled with Black Lives Matter supporters, you know, yelling at people at a street cafe, and you know, yelling at them to join the protest or they're racist, things like that. Those videos do exist. People do behave badly, and I guess I'm not. Nobody is in a position to control all people in, you know, you know, at the height of this, 60 million people were protesting globally for Black Lives Matter. So it's, you know, it's a tremendous number of people. There is no organization. So I'm more interested in figuring out how to talk about it in a way that acknowledges that there's violence certainly happening, there's fires happening, but it really isn't the thing to focus on, and it's kind of part of the landscape.
Well, also another thing about it too is a lot of times, you know, we have seen people that are committing violence. You know, they're not provocateurs per se, but they're not Black BLM, and they're also not Antifa. They're literally just anarchists, anti-capitalists that just decide, hey, I hate commerce.
Especially in Portland.
Yeah, let's just fucking burn down some shit. So they're opportunists who basically are using their own agenda, using this to cover their own agenda, because they're just anti-capitalist, and they decide, well, fuck capitalism, so I'm just gonna burn shit down.
I mean, the other side is going to use any opportunity they can to label the entire left as Antifa, or blame everyone on the left for it. And when you see some of the footage, it's not protesters, it's not provocateurs, it's not, you know, Black Lives Matter, it's Black Bloc, and it happens all the time. Trump's inauguration, and the Women's March in D.C. I mean, I was there. I went to the Women's March, but the day before, there was a riot in D.C. and the right was saying, "Look, it's, you know, it's the left. It's, you know, these radical feminists and the Women's March and the Pussy Hats. They're responsible for this." But that was the day before. It was a completely different demonstration, and it was an anarchist group. Black Bloc is dangerous, one of the most dangerous groups out there, because they make everybody look bad.
Yeah.
Well, in that regard,
Not a fan.
there's also a lot of self-fulfilling kind of thing, because, you know, the right wing, they've been blaming, you know, minorities and feminists and all this stuff on all their problems to begin with. So of course they're looking for anything that they could even call that. And how many times have we seen, you know, these pictures and that stuff that said, oh, well, here's Portland, or here's, you know, somewhere in Wisconsin or whatever. Turns out, oh, that was actually 2014 in Brazil or something completely, or in China or somewhere, you know, completely elsewhere. But they just lie because it fits their narrative, which is kind of fucked up, because you think about it, if you have to lie that often to make your point, maybe your point's bullshit. You know?
I want to jump in real quick, because I've been trying. I've lost about 3 different things, but to what you were just saying, we've obviously got the election coming up in just under 2 months now, right? Yeah. And it could go either way, of course, and that's terrifying. But just on this one issue of police brutality and racial injustice in America, the divergence of what would happen with Trump versus what would happen with Biden. And I'm not claiming Biden's a savior by any stretch of the imagination. Having said that, 4 more years of Trump, and he's already talking about wanting to give police immunity and stuff like that. And it's just terrifying to me. You know, I mean, like,
that's one of the problems.
Where does this end? How does this actually end?
Oh my God. You know, sometimes I wonder, so I don't know how familiar you guys are with The Walking Dead, the zombie TV show. And I don't know, in one of the earlier seasons, that because I remember we talked about this, we were talking about it in our household. There's this part where Daryl, because he's like the most, you know, the biggest character on the show or whatever, and he's the redneck, right? So he has lived this life growing up being a redneck, you know, knowing how to, you know, shoot the crossbow, shoot the guns, capture, you know, go hunting for animals, and basically doing the outdoor lifestyle or whatever. But he's also been the dumb redneck, and then the zombie apocalypse happens, and now he is suddenly the most valuable person that they have within their group with regards to tracking people and knowing how to survive in the outdoors and all of this other stuff. And there's a episode or a series of episodes somewhere in the earlier parts of the show where I can't even remember what comes up, but suddenly he kind of goes away for a while, like off on his own, as he's wont to do in the show, because the things that made him useful in the zombie apocalypse are under kind of this implication that those things might go away, and the person that he was before the zombie apocalypse, which was this useless dumb redneck, isn't going to be necessary anymore. And now for a long time he has been necessary, and he doesn't want to go back to that. And sometimes I wonder if like this Daryl syndrome or scenario is what we witness with a lot of the people who are like my guns and the violence, is that they, for a very long time in our society, have been marginalized off to the side as you guys are like the undereducated redneck, you know, ingrates living off there in the Tules. But if civil war were to happen, or something were to happen where suddenly our country is in chaos, you guys can find a place where you feel that you're actually far more valuable, meaningful, and powerful in a chaotic society. And so they want to see that happen, even if they don't say that, like inside they want to see that happen, because that's a place where the only skills that they know in life suddenly become somewhat more useful than, you know, than they are in the current setting, right?
Yeah, the zombie apocalypse fantasy has always sort of meshed nicely with the militia movement. It certainly is part of the militia family. I would say militia movement has something to do with The Walking Dead's popularity. I've seen people on Twitter maybe accuse the reverse, that The Walking Dead created some of this, but I do think that it's more what you're saying, that these people who haven't felt like the center of society ever in their lives could see themselves, you know. I forget which comedian says this, but there's the joke that Americans are raised on the idea that given exactly the right set of circumstances, they become the most unrelenting badass possible.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
And to that regard, because that's something I actually have been saying for a very long time. When I first became aware of the militia people back in the early '90s, when you had Ruby Ridge and the Freemen out in Montana and all that kind of stuff, and there's a lot of other myths that we teach ourselves. But I realized a long time ago is that it's really a psychological defense mechanism. Because which would you rather believe, that you're an insignificant, ineffectual person with no prospects for the future, or you're a freedom fighter fighting against, the Zog and the deep state and all this other bullshit, that you're the one, and especially with the preppers, because they're not just preparing for the end, they're hoping for it, they're waiting for it. I've actually had people say, when the government collapses, not if the government collapses, when. They're looking forward to it, and they're doing everything they can to make it collapse, because like you said, then they get elevated. Oh, because I can hunt and I can fish and I can do all these other things. And I'm like, yeah, motherfucker, I can program and I can design and I can troubleshoot. So right now, in this epoch, my stuff's a lot more important than your bullshit.
That really does look like a Crayola.
Because I remember, yeah, I remember. I don't know if you guys were all, I think, old enough to remember the Freeman in Montana.
Oh.
Yeah.
It was like 94, 95 time frame.
Sounds kind
Something
of
like that.
familiar.
Basically was like they're basically non-payment of taxes to the point where like federal marshals were accompanying the IRS, because when the IRS went out there, they were getting shot at, and so federal marshals go out there to like, hey, you can't do that.
Right.
And so and basically you interview these people, and it's literally like it's just like the Clive and Bundy people. It's the same fucking people, where they basically been sapping off the taxpayer for years, not paying the dues because it's federal land, so you have to pay to do what they're doing, and and then when they're told they have to pay up, suddenly they're freedom fighters fighting against some injustice that they've invented in their head.
Montana's so beautiful too. Why does it have to have like more guns per person than any other state, even Idaho in the union?
Well,
Literally.
it's still the West. That's really what it is. It's still, it's one of the last frontier states.
I have friends that live. Every time I've been to Montana, I've loved it out there. I actually was looking at moving in that direction, but I'm super scared of how redneck it can be.
Gotta have an arsenal in case Bambi gets out of hand.
Yeah. 3.5 guns on average per person in the entire state of Montana. It's a lot of guns.
Wow.
I told one guy, he's like, well, dude, you should arm yourself. I said, the only reason why I would need to get a gun is to protect myself from someone like you.
Yeah, another person with a gun. What?
And what are you going to do with 0.5 guns? I mean,
I had a friend who an ex-army guy, and he's still my friend, actually, not had, but and he has an enormous collection, like over 250 guns. I think that are partially inherited from his father, because a bunch of them are antique or whatever. And one day we were talking about guns, and I had asked him, do they all work? And he was like, what good is a gun that doesn't work, right? And because I had said, I was like, well, did you know, like, I could get a pink gun. I could get like a pink Glock 9mm. Wouldn't that be so awesome? And he was like, no. He's like, you will never get a pink gun because that destroys the entire purpose of the gun. That's like standing in the woods, waving your gun around like, here I am, come and shoot me. He's like, what do you even want to get a gun for if you're not going to get it for like the most useful reason possible? And I was like, I don't have a response for that, actually. I mean, that's like super legit. Like,
he's making an assumption that what's the most useful, and that's like,
Well, I'm sorry, but I would. Well, I mean, granted, shooting guns at the range or whatever, it's fun, and I do enjoy doing stuff like that, or like way out in the middle of the woods shooting at like tree stumps and stuff. But I mean, realistically speaking, though, the reason that I would actually buy a gun is, in fact, to be defensive, and not really even defensive against the government, defensive against like my crazy neighbors, right? Because 72 hours after any major catastrophic event, and then people start going crazy, like Hurricane Katrina. The next thing you know, they're rowing by and trying to rob your house and kick in your door, and like.
I think a pink gun's more useful though, because if the whole idea is that the gun's the deterrent, well, a deterrent's only really a deterrent if people know that you have it. So having, so a concealed weapon makes no sense. Having a pink gun in a open holster, now that's everyone's going to see that fucking gun and they're going to know it's there. So if it's true that guns are a deterrent, they're going to go, shit, that woman's got, look at that gun she's got on here. I couldn't miss that thing if I wanted to.
I mean, it's so subjective, right? And even though that's true, that could be true in some cases. If your gun is just a typical black gun, you also give yourself a better ability to hide and to camouflage, whereas you remove that ability from yourself, thus taking away the versatility of your weapon, right? And if you're going to go and have the thing, would you not want it to be as versatile in any and all situations as you possibly can get it, right? Because
why do I need to hide?
Hypothetically,
I have your solution. So there's these like silicone camo covers for guns, that covers like 90% of it, and it, slides with all the moving parts, and it's designed to make your gun, waterproof in the woods, and,
hey, that's handy.
Just, be impact resistant. If you drop it, it's not going to go off and stuff like that. So, just keep the camo silicone skin on top of the bright pink gun, and you get the best of both worlds. Just, peel it off when the time comes.
this is full circle, but and I know it's a little early, but I know what .5 guns is good for. Like Jack was saying earlier, they're using ammo as currency. Why not half a gun?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
What was Mars attack?
eBay.
Yeah, I mean, guns.
And
Like,
I've actually lived gun free, just like Joe, since I left the army. I have not owned a gun. It kind of it lost its appeal to me as much. You know, I don't need to own one because other people have them if I need them, and I am a big guy.
Yeah. The last weapon that I held, the last gun that I held was an M16A1.
I haven't owned a gun since I was 18.
Isn't an M16 a fully automatic weapon, like a machine gun? Like, that's a military weapon, right?
It's actually, well, it's a military weapon, but it's semi-automatic with a 3-round burst.
Right.
Oh, well, because won't if you fire guns like that for an extended period of time, don't you run the risk of like melting your?
Yeah, I was gonna say A2.
The A2 has a 3-round burst.
Yeah, yeah. So the thing is, the M16 and the M16A1 both did have full auto, but the A1 was phased out in the 80s for the A2, which is because they realized that full auto was a waste because most of the time, you know, you with the kickback, you're not gonna hit anything. You're gonna be spraying bullets, and they found like in Vietnam, like it was like I think it's like 7,000 rounds or 10,000 rounds to per like shot that actually hit somebody. So they went to the burst because they found then you would aim and you'd actually have a chance of actually hitting something.
I mean, I will confess that I do like guns for the fun of going to shoot guns. I actually find that to be enjoyable. But it's terrifying to me though to think about having to use that in any kind of an actual, an actual situation that people are always. I find it kind of crazy, to be honest. These people riding on in. I agree very much with the notion that when you go into a situation, if you are essentially, open carry, right, then you are escalating the situation, even if silently, right, by having that there. And not only are you doing that with regards to other people, but you have created a road for your own brain to escalate things in the path of least resistance, which is to grab that weapon and use it as soon as you feel justified. If it wasn't there, you would have to think of any other way to resolve your issue, including running away, which quite frankly is really what you should do when conflict comes at you. Turn around and run. That's the best policy, right? And then only if it can't be done is when you have to engage. But if you put that there in a situation where suddenly your adrenaline is kicked in and something is in fact threatening you, or you think that it is, you lose your ability to some degree to think super critically, unless you're trained to do that. Unless you're the kind of person that's gone through years and years and years of training to be like, look at all of my exits, look at all of the things around here that could otherwise be used as a weapon, and if this was to happen, what would my first action? If that's not the kind of reaction you have, like literally everywhere you walk, then that's it. You've given yourself the easiest out, and it's that gun. And now,
I again just
As I
want to
said
point out, we
earlier,
don't speak
go
in a
ahead.
bubble here. We don't speak in a bubble. We do have the context of the Rittenhouse case, and he was running away. And when he was chased, he finally made that decision. And I just don't want our words taken out of context, or that people outside of the show might think that we don't know that that is also the thing that just happened.
Well, but to the point. I mean, I remember seeing a video like a year or two ago where it was I think it was a gas station, and there was a dispute over who got at the fucking pump, and they start arguing, and one guy gets in the other guy's face, and the other guy pulls out his revolver and shoots the guy in the head over a fucking spot. Yeah, get a gas
Yeah.
pump. So
As I
it's,
mentioned earlier, I grew up in Oakland, and I have a couple of specific stories about exactly this because, you know, I knew a variety of people. I grew up in, you know, what would be called, you know, one of the worst parts, particularly when I was younger, as we moved out when I was a teenager. But I mean, I did notice that people who had a gun tended to find trouble, and you know, a couple of different people I know find trouble because they carried a gun, and people who did not carry a gun, I mean, I didn't find myself in trouble. I've never been in a situation where I wished I had a gun, and I have been in a lot of
Yeah.
pretty
Well,
hairy situations.
and that's
It's
another reason. It's another
sorry.
reason why I reject that whole expression. I've talked about this before about the an armed society is a polite society. No, for one,
No,
that
yeah, there's
the
so
whole
much
idea.
evidence against that.
Yeah. The whole
Like,
idea that the implied threat of violence is the appropriate response to
yeah.
impoliteness is right off the bat not polite. But secondly, like you said, people when you feel empowered by that gun, you're way more likely to mix it up. So that's going to lead to definitely a less polite society. A guy I used to be friends with. We were going out to the Stone Pony, and he was thinking about bringing a gun that night, and I told him, yeah, why don't you not do that, because in New Jersey he didn't, it's very hard to get a concealed permit, and he didn't have one. And I was like, yeah, no, don't do that. We went out. He ended up getting himself kicked out of the club. He wanted me to drive him home so he could get his gun and bring him back to the club.
Was he
Now, just
drunk?
imagine if he had brought the gun with him, he would have shot that guy for kicking him out of the
Yeah.
club. And here he was basically trying to recruit me to become an accessory to murder.
Yeah.
Because
It was, at the beginning of the lockdown.
This would have been a 45-minute drive in each way, which means it would have totally premeditated murder. You know,
At the beginning of the lockdown, there was the guy that worked at the store who told the girl she needed a mask. She left and came back with her father, and her father shot the guy.
I don't remember that.
Yes, I remember that.
Holy crap.
yeah, back in April.
And there's someone that some of us here know who has went a little bit more extreme recently, who is very much a gun person, and he made a video recently where he was sitting in his van. I stepped away for a moment. If this has already been said, I apologize.
It has.
But he's sitting in his van making a video, and just because people were looking towards him,
Yes.
being in his van, he's like, I'm getting my gun ready. I'm ready to shoot this guy. He's looking at me funny, and I'm going, dude, what the hell? What? I mean, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. He in his video stopped in the middle of his ramble and said, just look at me again like that. And he was holding his gun, like, as he flashed the gun to the camera, like he was ready to shoot someone in a grocery store parking lot just for looking at him too long. And in his mind, the first person who looked at him while he was in his car might have been connected to the second. Like, the first person might have called in the person with the gun. Like, he was creating a scenario in his video that I was like, I'm not sure that you need to be sitting in parking lots with a gun anymore. You're a little wound up.
Yeah, when I saw that, sorry, I just have to say, I saw the same video, and I have been continually flabbergasted by recent videos, and I don't know. I haven't known him for as well or as long as you have, Michael. And the thing is, to me, I mean, I still can't get my head around, is this real? Yeah. I don't know, because there's trolling, and then there's poing, and then there's but then again, that scene that Kazum just described, I saw that scene, and he seemed like, yeah, what are you looking at me for? And I got this gun right here, and I'm just like, Why would that be anybody's go-to? Unless you see someone pointing a gun at you, why would you even contemplate handling your firearm? You know, it blows my mind. I mean, and then people like that talk about how they're responsible gun owners, and that's the real rub that fucking pisses me off.
The rabbit hole that that people are able to go down right now, the alt-right rabbit hole that people are able to go down is just scary. How it changes people is scary.
You know, it's interesting. We were so kind of related to what we were talking about at the very beginning of the show, which was the QAnon, the whole kind of cult thing going. So lately, I've been watching, like, kind of binge watching at night, this what's her name? Her name I can't remember. Some actress, whatever, who left Scientology, and so she made this whole huge. Yeah, that's her, Remini. Yes, and it is really quite fascinating with regards to how people get into it, because they are seemingly regular people that then suddenly become a part of this huge cult mentality. And like some of the things that they were talking about for traits that people have in common are oftentimes when they join up, at the time that they join at the beginning, so many of them have just suffered something in their life, say someone has died or they've had a breakup or whatever it is, and they are looking for some kind of answers or something to help them navigate whatever it is that they're going through. And this is when they happen to either bump into an encounter or meet somebody that is like, oh, you should come try this thing. And then it is exactly like you guys were saying with the QAnon, whereas, and it wasn't, Jack was saying that, I think he was the person who was talking about that, but there is a writer, a scientist who makes is it Carl Sagan maybe, who makes a quote about how once people have started to believe something, the longer they believe it, the more difficult it is for them to change their mind on it, because so much more becomes increasingly invested in this belief that they have put in, that they have adopted. And it's like the same thing. It's like once they start in Scientology and then they start paying the first little bit of money and the next little bit of money, that pretty soon now you're in it, and then you can't or don't want to get out of it, because that involves having to admit to yourself that I just wasted $50,000 on nothing, or whatever it is, right? Like I argued for this, I fought for this, I did whatever. But it's so scary how easy it works.
To that point, most of them, when you challenge them on their beliefs and you say, oh, you believe that alien overlord Xenu attacked us like thousands of years ago, they're like, what are you talking about? A lot of QAnon people, when you say, oh, you believe in a satanic cult that's like porting around children and then they're killing people and drinking the adrenochrome like vampires. Like you explain that to them and say, challenge their belief. They're like, what are you talking about? It's like the tiniest part of their belief, and it's off to the side, but it's the part that we pick up on first that sounds so absurd,
right?
And they're like, no, this is about cleaning up politics, or this is about my gun rights,
right?
Like Gamergate.
Yeah.
This is a good place for me to actually bring this up. I've been wanting to ask this question for weeks, and I'm so glad that I've got the gang that I've got here tonight for this particular question, because it feeds into what you're just talking about. I watched The Great Hack last year, and I was rewatching it with my gal the other day. And if you haven't seen The Great Hack, I think on Netflix, it's required viewing. It's a documentary. It's about 2 hours long, and you'll never sleep properly again. But it's about how our data is basically used behind our backs, in ways that we don't understand or even fully appreciate. And this is what I want to ask you, because what you guys were just talking about, I'm curious, do you think there's such a thing? Is it possible, or is there such a thing maybe analogous to internet hypnosis? because I know for a fact I spend an awful lot of time online, and at various different points in my life, I've spent much more time than I do now. And especially we were talking about earlier with the algorithms that will push shit at you that it thinks you want to see and everything. Do you think that it is possible to psychologically brainwash and or hypnotize someone by repeated subliminal and otherwise overt messages completely forced at them all the time, which either confer or deliberately object to their preferred way of looking at things? Because if you're trying to provoke someone into action, you're going to show them a lot of stuff that they object to, because you want them to be angry, because the best way to harness anger to get someone to act is to make them angry, right? So do you think there's such a thing as internet hypnosis, or perhaps something like that? Go ahead, Michael. Or Sister Dangerous.
So
I actually want you to go first, because you're going to have more actual real knowledge on this from your professional standpoint.
The words that you use in my professional standpoint are from a different wizarding house.
Yes, thank you.
Just coming from the world of behaviorism, which was my undergrad focus. I wouldn't call it brainwashing. I'd call it classic conditioning. Because when you watch that one thing and then you get suggested something that's just a little bit more extreme, those things show up in your suggestion box, it looks a lot more like conditioning to me.
Yeah, and that's a self-selecting process too. You only have to, because you're going to click off of the video that is, sorry, go ahead.
I was just, hopping through the forest. No, I was going to ask for a definition of terms there. I would not, because I'm like, I don't know if I would say hypnosis. I agree with the conditioning thing for certain, because I know for a fact, like in marketing, for example, people have to see an advertisement an average of about 10 times before they will either click on it, and then certainly before they will just buy from it. And so they have to see that over and over and over until they become acclimated to it. And I think, so I definitely believe that if you are showing something to somebody repeatedly, you can very effectively condition them into some kind of a belief system, and that we do and have done it for a really long time, much longer than if this has been going on.
Well, yeah, you think about it in print. It worked in print and it worked on television. So there's every reason to believe it works on the internet. In fact, because the internet, unlike print and television, is interactive, it's easier because you're when you're just passive and you're just looking at something, it has a certain effect. But when you actually get to interact with it, other parts of your brain get involved and you become immersed in it. It's even and one really good example of this is even just eBay auctions. How many eBay auctions have you seen where just the idea of wanting to win the auction, that someone ends up paying more on the auction than they could buy it in the store for a product that's still available? I can understand a collectible item that you can't get, that's rare, but I've seen auctions go for stuff that's readily available in a store.
For $10, and then they'll pay $25 for it. Yeah, just go in.
I talked about the.
I do want to. Oh, can I just make a real quick? Yeah. No, just like one other thing to tack on to Paul, because Paul also mentioned subliminal messaging, and so don't quote me on this, but I believe that some long time ago I had read studies about subliminal messaging, which basically kind of poo-pooed it. That when it's too subliminal, we don't pick up on it. Like there's weird stuff in the static of your TV, right? Or there's naked women in the ice cubes of Jack Daniels bowlers. It's too subtle. We don't really pick up on it. But things like product placement, absolutely, right? Which I don't know if I'd call that subliminal really. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there, that I don't think subliminal is really a thing.
Sister Danger, I don't know if subliminal advertising works, but right now I have this strong feeling about boobs, and I want to buy crayons, and I think fairies are in danger. I don't know why.
Jack, did you have something?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, because I worked in advertising. Now I'm not a writer of copy or stuff. I make things that show up in print advertisements and commercials and things like that. you're absolutely correct about that. It's 7 times that somebody has to see something before it sticks. And there is this what's called the ratchet effect. And the ratcheting effect has been used in other studies too. People talk about how America has slowly sort of gone right wing through this ratchet effect. But that same effect is true in the videos that come through our feed. Is if you're watching some slightly more radical than you're used to YouTuber, they might say a couple of things that offend you, but if you're not chased away from the video, then you've ratcheted slightly over into this, your Overton window has opened slightly, and then the next video. But if you see a video that's too extreme, that you're just gonna click off. So, in the sense that it is this conditioning process happens, you're a voluntary participant in it, although you may not be wholly conscious of that voluntary participation. You're also training the algorithm.
Voluntary? Like, how can you be voluntary but unwitting?
Okay, so I'll clarify something, because I don't actually believe in free will. Like, when I say voluntary or free will or something, I mean that it is part of your sphere of acceptability, and so you will accept it and move to that new space. But no, I don't believe that people are making any kind of conscious decision about it. It's simply now landscape.
Remember a couple of years ago, Facebook did that whole experiment where a certain percentage of their subscribers only saw negative status updates from
Right.
people on their friends list. They only saw negative news, and they only posted negative things.
Right.
They didn't post happy things. They reacted. How they felt about the world changed based on what was in their feed. And they had, I guess, there was also a group of people, all they got was happy stuff, and all they posted was happy stuff. So, I mean, so the things that we see on the internet, I don't know about brainwashing, but conditioning makes sense, but also, like, during the day, it can set our mood and our tone. And that kind of stuff is going to affect other things that we do and other media that we consume. So it's like, if we're already convinced that there is, a child sex trafficking ring out of a basement of a pizza place where that pizza place doesn't have a basement, we may go looking for more stories like that to confirm what we've already been convinced of.
Well, again, there's that
in this
sunk cost.
modality. In this thing that we've set up, this construct we've set up, this perspective where this ratcheting effect happens with YouTube videos, I think it's fair to call Sargon of Akkad, Tim Pool, or Dave Rubin gateway drugs to the alt-left or alt-right.
Alt-right, yeah, I was going to say.
They get you into the discussion, and then depending on which of their episodes you watch, we'll say Joe Rogan as well. If you fall into that, you're going to get sorted based on where you lean, right? It's going to happen.
Sargon is his own ratcheting effect, because I mean, if you've seen Sargon's content from when he started to today, I mean, he's so much more extreme than he used to be.
Oh yeah.
But that he is his own alt-right that he was the gateway to.
Well, see, the thing is with Sargon that gets me is that, because I was never really on board with him. I think I was subscribed for a couple weeks, but I realized even back then he was kind of vacuous, but he filled, particularly in the atheist community, there was this need for people just getting out of religion. You feel kind of hostile toward it. And so he basically just kind of like laughed, looked down his nose and laughed at people like, oh, aren't these people idiots? And that appealed to people who needed to hear that. And then over time, he started interjecting the political stuff and kind of going down this right-wing path. And so I guess for me, I'm generally hostile toward advertising. So I won't say it doesn't ever impact me, because that would be a lie and that would definitely wouldn't be accurate. But I think I'm I tend to be less impacted than most people. And those two extremes you talked about, the people who are always posting only negative and the people who only post positive, and they both make me sick.
I have to confess, my jury is sort of out. I'm kind of neutral on advertising because it really depends on what it is. Because I actually like that the advertising, if I just click on the things that I kind of want to see more of, I like that it will show me more of that. What I don't like is when I get just rando things in my feed. I mean, Trump stuff, or I don't know, usually things like that. I'm like, where is this even coming from? Or religious things, but or I hate it when I see, like, for example, I think that it's very apparent about me, at least through my social media, that I am heavily involved in all things indie, right? I interview indie authors on my channel every single week. I host a show where I showcase handmade people every single Sunday, right? Like 6 of them a week, right? And this is in all of my social media. But do I ever see a Facebook ad from Etsy? Nope. But I see bunches of Facebook ads from little companies overseas or whatever selling the same kind of thing. And so I try to look at the bright side, and that's where I go like guerrilla marketing. I'm like, hey, look at this company in China making masks. But here, I know about 20 people right here at home making masks through their own small businesses. And then I like guerrilla market, and I post in the comments of those. Every time an ad comes up for masks, I'm like, or you guys could go buy handmade. And then I post somebody's link to their business, right? Like, because you look at these things and there's like, 5,000 people that have clicked like, and I'm like, well, obviously people are going to see it. So I'll go ahead and try to use it as best I can. Right.
And I'm okay with that. I find, especially large corporate marketing, a lot of it is really an insult to everyone's intelligence.
Yeah.
And I think I've mentioned before, like I despise
Not
Dr. Squatch and the pitch guy that they have with the beard, who's always talking about washing his balls and all this kind of shit.
Oh God,
because
I hate that.
because it's basically it's anti-science crap, because it's basically like other soaps are classified as synthetic detergents. I'm like, yeah, so is yours, because every soap is a fucking detergent, you moron. It's just, that's the kind of stuff that drives me nuts, and I hate it. And my business, I think, would actually be more successful than it has been if I marketed more. But I never ever want to become the thing I hate.
Believe me, I understand.
Advertising where they have all of the soda companies now, they've all banded together, for this this campaign to make people aware of healthy alternatives to their product. Oh, bullshit. Bullshit. All that is a way to virtue signal, so they can look like they care about you, so you're going to spend more money on them. Or they're going to be pushing products that they are already in their line.
I was literally just talking about this phenomena to a friend of mine. It's super true of people younger than us, of millennials as consumers. That because I was basically a few days ago, I was in my head kind of struggling with this notion of, do I want to unfriend people from my Facebook, because I'm just so tired of seeing people repeating things which are demonstrably untrue. Not, I have a different opinion than you, but literally, I just made this big post. Like, if somebody came to me and tried to actually tell me why I should reconsider whether or not the earth is round, I would laugh them off the proverbial edge of their fucking earth, because that is insane. Okay, goodbye. And that's true of so many things. And there are just so many things going on in our society that are demonstrably false. And there are people on my Facebook that I've known for a long time, some of them, and they are just over there in their own world, and they continue to post misinformation about things, misinformation about the spread of COVID and how it works. Masks don't do anything to help you at all, and it's like, because you can breathe through it and air can pass through it. And I'm like, either you're like ridiculously dumb or you're purposefully doing this, right? Like, yeah. And it's just harmful. It's harmful. And so I was like, do I want to remove these people though? And that was this question that I was super asking myself, because years ago when I started my business, I really had this impression that I must be friends to all people as much as I possibly can and neutral in order to not detriment my business. I'm a small little person. But weirdly, we now live in this age where the people who are consumers want to make their business at companies they know share their values. And so
Right.
it's actually in my benefit to basically be like, no, I do value diversity and I do value all people's lives, and to stand behind that really strong, because ultimately that I mean, I might experience a small dip for a minute, like the 1 week where everybody boycotts Nike because I don't know, shoes or something, but their sales go right back up. They don't experience that long term. I mean, everybody keeps shopping there. Everybody's still shopping at Walmart, still shopping at Hobby Lobby, whatever, you know.
I mean, that's an issue for the left
every now and
in
then.
general, is we've kind of discovered that the internet has brought us to a post-boycott world. Boycotts are simply not effective, really, ever. And in fact, signaling that you will boycott is going to make an equal or even exaggerated, opposition to you double down. With the Keurig, the Nike thing was about Colin Kaepernick, by the way. That everyone was burning their shoes or whatever, and you're right. Nike experienced nothing. Keurig experienced.
Well, especially though, because right wingers are such idiots that they went out and bought Nikes to burn, which totally killed the whole point of what they're trying to do. They can put money in the pocket of the company I hate.
A couple of years ago, there was the boycotting the gas stations. Don't go to the pump. It was like 3 days or something like that. Don't go to the pump for this 3-day period. We'll teach them a lesson. So what did everyone do? They went the day before and filled up their tanks.
Right.
Well, what good is the boycott? You're giving them all the money you were going to give them anyway.
Right, because you have to. And in fact, gasoline is one of the few price inelastic things in the economy, because you can curtail a little bit, but you got to get to work. You got to get to work.
Yeah.
So that's why, and because I know that when I hear a lot of the bullshit about when prices get jacked up artificially, I know it's horseshit, because they're like, no, you're not doing that because of this other thing. Plus the fact that I've done work in refineries, so I actually know, like, when they tell you that they're reformulating at that time of year and the price has to go up, it's complete horseshit. They don't do any of that with the distillation anymore. It's all done at the point of distribution. I know, because I work on the distribution systems. So but you're talking about the companies that are actually like being more forward. Penzeys, the spice company, they sell spices and blends and all that. It's one of the reasons why, I like the products, but I also like the fact that they've been unabashed anti-Trump for at least the last 2 years, openly like, this guy needs to go and he's bad news for the country, and anyone who has values is for him, and if you are for him, you don't have values, and they're doing great. And
Didn't he vandalize his own store?
Who did?
Trump?
The guy that owns the Penties. There was an article that he had said something basically publicly, and somebody said, "Yeah, well, your business isn't the one that's on fire." So he vandalized his own business and said, "There you go, screw you."
Wow.
Nice.
I actually feel some kind of a sense of responsibility, actually, to take what I find to be the more humane, moral, and ethical stances. I mean, where else does that resistance come from? Like, how else do you push back against things like systemic racism, if not by saying, openly, that is not going to happen here. Like, not here. Not allowed.
That's why I have no patience for people who basically will say, well, yes, I don't like that Chick-fil-A supports anti-gay charities and different organizations, but their chicken is so delicious. No, first off, no, it fucking isn't. If you think that is, you need to get your taste buds examined. Secondly, even if it was the best chicken in the universe, basically what you're saying is the taste of that chicken is more important to you than than LGBTQ people. And you know, you can have that opinion. If that's your opinion, you can have that opinion. But then don't try to tell me you give a fuck about LGBTQ people, because clearly you don't. And that's okay. I mean, it's not. I think you're a scumbag, but you know, you can have that position. It's a valid position to have, no matter how
Right.
scumbag it makes you. But don't pretend that you like that. That's a value you share when you clearly don't. You value chicken over LGBTQ people.
I
Wait a
could
minute.
be wrong.
If
Sorry,
someone,
go ahead, Kiz.
I don't know, man. I guess I think about the Chick-fil-A situation. I mean, how many people, how many businesses are there out there where the business owners don't actually state their opinions about things, and they might feel a certain way about this group or that group?
But they don't stick.
Should we buy? Should we? I don't know, man.
But you
Well,
can't.
I feel like it shouldn't matter ultimately in regards to business, but the reason that it matters is because businesses are allowed to put their dollars into things that are governmental. And if that
That's
wasn't
it right
like,
there.
if that wasn't possible, if it wasn't possible for them to use their millions of dollars to back politicians or other people that then
And
make
lobbyists.
laws and lobbyists and
Yeah.
things like that, then it wouldn't matter to me if Hobby Lobby, if they're, you know, because like to me, like your Chick-fil-A is my Hobby Lobby, right? Because those people are all like ultra Christian and anti-abortion and all, you know, not anti-abortion, like anti-choice is what I'm trying to say. And I just don't agree with that. And I don't like to shop at Hobby Lobby. Have I done it before? Maybe like 5 times in my life, but I very much try to go everywhere but there. But if they weren't able to use the money they generate from their company to try to create political and societal reform in their vision, then I wouldn't care. You guys can believe whatever you want. It's that you have an unfair advantage in how
People have the right to be wrong.
yes, they do. You know, but they have an unfair advantage into how they can influence our system. And so that's why you boycott the thing, or I'd like to say, to my credit, I've never actually eaten not a bite from Chick-fil-A. I don't even know what's on their menus. Anyway,
So-
Oh, sorry, Rob. Go ahead, Rob.
For me, it's a. Oh,
No, I was just
okay.
going to say that first off, I have their secret recipe for their chicken. I know it. I have it. And their secret ingredient, by the way, is pickle juice. Just in case you didn't know that.
I love pickle juice.
Why their chicken tastes so good. It's pickle juice. That's number one. And number two, yeah, basically everything that Sister Danger said. I mean, if they didn't have, if their money didn't buy them the opportunity to put their hands on the levers of your life, Kazoom, or mine, I wouldn't care. But they're buying the opportunity to alter your life, to mess with what you're allowed to do, not allowed to do.
Well, also, too,
For me, it'd be mainly about if a company is actually like doing things in their business model that goes against a certain demographic. Like if Chick-fil-A was shown that they discriminate against gay people or something on that matter, you know, that's to me where, yeah, boycott them. It makes sense. They're a terrible company. They're not following the way the laws are supposed to be. You know, boycott the hell out of them. Put it on the news. Do all of that. But if someone just happens to believe something that's anti-gay, well, as long as they're not doing anything that's anti-gay, that's
they are, though.
But they are. That's the point.
Sorry, let me. I've
Okay.
been very patient. I have to jump in here. Right. So I understand the arguments, and I'm not trying to devalue the whole Chick-fil-A thing. But quite frankly, my friends, we all contribute to this massive system of international capitalism, which exploits people and starves people. Yeah, that's just true. Chick-fil-A is a tiny, tiny fragment of this massive worldwide system of exploitation that we can't help but feed into. So I think it's a little gratuitous almost to worry about this when it's the entire system and the way it works that is to blame. It's not just this one issue. It's the whole thing about how there's so many moral issues with how capitalism works that they're highly problematic, right? And I'm not necessarily saying I'm against like market capitalism per se, but the exploitation and the deprivation that is a direct result of capitalism, we're all partly responsible for that. And
Paul,
so
in the comments, you've just been accused of having morals in your politics.
Which
I wanted to address that. I mean, okay,
Is that Brock?
Yeah, that's Brock in the comments.
Moralizing your politics. I'm sorry. I want my politics to be moral. I don't understand.
I'm not sorry.
I don't understand what's wrong with morals.
Well, it's hilarious too.
I don't think that's what he's saying.
A right-wing evangelical Christian who basically tries to say how he was so much more moral than everybody else, accusing us of moralizing. So it's like, yeah, good, because we, I can't speak for anybody else, but I think that your morals suck. So, that's fine. And that's the thing, Brock. You have the right to have whatever you want. And then to Kazum's point, yes, that person can do that if they want to do. But the whole point is, I get to choose how I spend my money. So they're choosing how they're spending their money. So they're supporting anti-gay charities and groups and all that. They can do that as long as they're not violating the law. They can do all that. I can choose how to spend my money, because that's actually how market capitalism works. We can choose. I can choose based on the quality of the product, the service. I can also choose whether or not I think the CEO is a scumbag.
We also know that doesn't work. Just saying.
One more thing before I get off. Jack back on. I'm gonna let Jack back on, but I just want to say, since it seems that Brock is still viewing and there in the comments, Brock, I implore you to come on to the screen and he's got the link. So everybody who will tolerate Brock coming on favorably or at least amicably, raise your hand.
Talking dirty politics, boys. Let's go.
There you go. So yeah, there you go, Brock. I mean, you're cordially invited. Right. You guys carry on. I'm going to let Jack back on.
But yeah, so to me, it's not like if I decide I'm not going to give money to Penzie's competitor because Penn just say he's a Trump supporter. Well, that's my choice. That was how, to me, that's my value. So I value the companies that support a certain thing, and other people, Brock presumably would support the opposite. Would probably not give his custom to Penzie's and would support somebody else. That's democratic.
So can I just ask though? So what Goth was saying about, I guess what we've all been saying about how when the company uses their dollars, they are in fact taking the action that you're talking about, right? Because your point is that who cares what the owners think as long as they're not taking an action. But we're saying that them using their dollars to basically lobby for, laws that support whatever their stances are on things, that is them. So do you agree with that, or do you still hold that? Do you still hold your stance? Do you agree that them using their money in that way is the same, synonymous with them taking action, if you will? Like, what are your thoughts here?
Well, I mean, I see your point, but I also my main concern is whether or not they're actually in the way they run their business are doing things that go against, let's say, my demographic.
Are mutually exclusive, though?
Well, and I guess my point to Kizzy would be that if that's how you want to do your purchases, you're free to do that. That's the great part about it. The thing is, but I would also point out that if they're doing what you're suggesting, like, okay, if they were doing something within their business practices, well, there's actually another remedy, which is actually the law. There's labor laws, there's business ethics laws, there's all sorts of different things. So that if they were discriminating, we actually have a law, and so a boycott shouldn't even be necessary, because we should be able to, basically have a labor action and then sue them, or have the officials, sanction them in some way under the law. So boycotts are really used
a little bit.
Yeah, boycotts are used when there is no auspices under the law to take action, and so it's a way. Okay, as individuals, the law doesn't favor me, or maybe favors neither of us, but I want to take action. So that's my remedy is I'm going to say, I'm not going to support you, and I may not support your advertisers as another way to kind of push things, that's how Don Imus got fired. Don Imus didn't get fired because he said nappy-headed hose. The NBC didn't give a shit. They fired him because he started to cost them money, because people boycotted his advertisers, and they were like, the same thing happened to Bill Riley. People started boycotting the advertisers, and then NBC and Fox respectively said, "Oh, you guys are costing us more money than you're bringing in now. You need to go."
I mean, laughing a little
you make
bit,
a good point,
just because employees being able to sue their employers for doing illegal things is not something that works out in the employees' favor all that often. We don't actually have a legal system that is fair or equitable based on class.
If it looked like there was that possibility, Trump would actually make it illegal to sue them, such as he did with Tyson,
right,
indemnifying the owners and saying everybody go back to work.
Well, pre-Trump, we did actually, the Department of Labor, because I have a relative that works at the Department of Labor, and their job was actually to bring job actions against companies. So pre-Trump, we actually did have a DOL that would actually do this. And I was talking to my relative the other day, and they were like, they're really kind of at wit's end, because there are tons of cases that should be getting brought, but because the Trump administration has control over whether or not those cases do get brought or not, they're just literally just not doing their job. They're literally not enforcing the law.
I mean only that, wage theft existed in almost the same numbers under Obama as it does under Trump. We simply just don't have a fair legal system when it comes to laws.
I guess what I end up thinking about when it comes to places like Chick-fil-A is I have a lot of gay friends on Facebook who will say that, who will make they'll say things like, well, if you buy something from Chick-fil-A, you're anti-gay. And I'm just like, well, how about the people that work for Chick-fil-A? If someone works for Chick-fil-A and they're gay, does that mean that they're actually anti-gay? I don't know. It's kind of weird because I've been to a couple Chick-fil-A's where there's employees that are pretty blatantly, you can tell that they're gay. Are those employees anti-gay because they're working for a company that does those things? I don't know. It's just there's a
no. I would say no. I would say they're actually because they're stuck in a system where they probably don't have any better job prospects. They are stuck supporting something that actually hurts them.
Yeah.
Right.
Wage slaves.
Yeah. It sort of goes back to what I was saying about labor laws, is that Chick-fil-A very well may be firing people for being gay. If they're open about it, they may have a don't ask, don't tell policy type thing. And there's not that much that an individual employee can do about it. Maybe if they join together in a lawsuit or something. But I mean, for myself, as we've been talking about, I think people have absolute right to be totally wrong. People have the right to be bigots. There's the whole spectrum of human sort of beliefs, and they have their freedom of speech. But there's also the power balance that comes from running really large corporation, and as Sister Danger said, having access to the levers of power, even if it's only buying those levers.
Well, okay, so another thing, and I kind of want to speak to what Sirius was saying, with regards to that is your choice to not shop there, bloody law. But if I asked you right now, can you tell to me what the political stances of Jersey Mike's is? Would you be able to answer that question for me? And so I don't like the argument. I actually kind of despise the argument of, well, free market capitalism, it's your choice to not go shop there. First of all, we know that free market capitalism doesn't work. That's why we actually have regulated capitalism, no matter how much we've destroyed it in the last 30 years, but that's why we have that in our country, because we know that free market capitalism does not work. Boycotting things does not work for if you are big enough. It only works if it's very, very small. And we have reached a point in this country where we have too many big box things. So it's not actually really a very good solution. But also, there is a level of transparency that doesn't exist between what the people think and are able to use their businesses money for versus what people know about, like, their business stands in the way. So as long as they personally keep quiet, stay out of the media, aren't putting their personal beliefs out on parade or whatever, their company can continue to do all the things that it does. They can take that money quietly, and then they can go over here and they can use that to influence politics and all other such things without anybody ever knowing, right? Because even if they had to wear their politics on their sleeve as a corporation, who can remember that for every single place that produces every single thing or goes into the manufacture?
There are websites that track that, actually.
I'm not saying there's not, but nevertheless, how many companies are involved in the production of, say, a single Ford vehicle, right? And what are all of those companies' stances? And can you boycott all of Ford because one company in that manufacturing chain is anti-whatever? No. So this is why I say the solution. I mean, you can. Okay, you can. You can. But it's not a very realistic. It's not a very realistic, and I think that things that don't realistically correspond with the world in a way that's actionable are kind of just as good as useless, right?
As an electrician in the union, I was on job sites where there were fleas. They called them. It was like a special club that they were in where they would enforce the unwritten rules of the union. And they would go into the parking lot and they would flip cars that were foreign made. If you drove to work in a foreign made car, you would have your car physically flipped over by a gang of people. And so they would check the VIN numbers of certain brands of cars because half of Mitsubishis are made in America. Certain types of Toyotas are made in America.
Yeah,
so
Mitsubishi or Dodge.
The large Toyota Tundra is made in Texas. So they don't flip that one, but they'll flip the other Toyota. So you have to pay attention to which VIN number sequence you have if you're going to get the American made version of some cars and not have your car flipped over. And they had a publication that had a list of all the American made cars, that they were giving out to people so that you would know if your car was or was not. And it's basically like a shopping list of what's allowed.
Well, I think Kazuma is saying that in some ways his Facebook friends are acting as those fleas about Chick-fil-A. That there's and there is a sort of tribalism that does definitely happen where in groups have their enforcers. The mean girls of the group kind of exist in many spheres.
Well, that's the one advantage of being an outcast. You don't have to worry about any of that shit. But I mean, see, the problem for me was when the whole thing that happened with Chick-fil-A is I had stopped eating there years ago, long before I knew anything about their politics, because they only ever made one thing that I liked, and then they canceled that in the late 90s, and then the rest of their food sucked. So I just stopped going. So I couldn't give up something that I already gave up. I can't boycott something that I don't. That's why I always tell people who do boycott something to accompany the boycott with a letter. When companies still look at letters, because the problem is that they don't know why you as an individual stopped consuming their product. Because people come and go all the time, particularly in large corporations. And that's why when you do notice boycotts that do work, I think they do work occasionally. It's because they're organized and they actually get large numbers of people together to basically make the statement that, yes, we are actually not consuming you and possibly your advertisers because of reason X, Y, Z. Those are the ones that at least have a chance of working.
So I want to point out that everything that Brock has said in the comments, everything that he said, everything basically bad-mouthing us and the things that we're talking about, yet nothing he says is connected in any way to anything we're saying or talking about. It's as if he's typing from a script of what he thinks he should be saying to liberals during a discussion. Imagine a future, look at this, imagine a future where this group of Orwellians gets this to materialize. It would literally be civil war.
Oh no, he's just watching the RNC and typing in our chat by mistake.
Yeah, right? I mean, because what we're talking about already has materialized. This is the reality that we're now living in.
And always has been.
This is the world that we're in. So
again, boycott. The funny thing about it, what I always laugh at right wingers when they go off about us talking about boycotts, is that at least libertarian types, which Brock claims to be, they tell us we don't need regulation. We don't need the government involved. That if a company is doing something wrong, that the appropriate tool is to get other people to boycott. So of course now our remedy is only dependent on if we can get enough people to agree with us. So it makes it very democratic. So they tell us that's what we should do. We don't need regulation. People need to vote with their dollars. Now that's literally all we're talking about. This is actually a market solution to a social problem potentially, and he's against it because libertarians are full of shit. Libertarians are completely and utterly full of shit. They don't believe.
Whoa.
Rand Paul. Rand Paul. He got yelled at and he wanted people arrested.
Yeah, Rand Paul.
Wide brush there that we're going to apply to all those libertarians.
Libertarians are full of shit. All libertarians.
Yeah, there's a difference, of course, between civil libertarians and economic libertarians, which I assume that Brock is an economic libertarian.
Yes, he's an economic libertarian, and he's full of shit, just like the rest.
What I'll say about Chick-fil-A is I'm dissuaded from wanting to eat there. Misty has forced me to eat there twice in 6 years of being with her, and both times my general feeling was, wow, this is a really long line around this building that we're waiting in. I'm thinking that while I'm dissuaded, every bigot within like a 50-mile radius loves to eat Chick-fil-A because of what they stand for. And it's like a marketing thing. They're just, they found a niche. They serve bigots.
Right. And
I'll admit that I think as far as fast food, their spicy chicken, I've not been able to see beat anywhere else. The regular chicken sucks. It's not that great, but their spicy chicken, I've not seen beat anywhere else as far as fast food.
You're just eating your own people, Kazoom. you tasted the spicy chicken. That's it. Out of the garden with you, sir.
And mind you, look, people can eat whatever the hell they want. I mean, I have no power to stop them or really even influence them. But
people should be allowed to eat other people if the other people are consenting.
Yes, actually, it's your body. If you want other people to consume you, and you're allowing that, and other people want to consume you, I don't give a shit.
Isn't that kind of a libertarian viewpoint?
Well, but see, it's an actual it would be an actual libertarian viewpoint. But again, civil libertarian, well, not really, sorry, economic civil libertarians, free market libertarians who claim they're libertarians are all full of crap. Because again, they don't, because as I've pointed out before, if you actually believe in the principle of non-aggression and that you shouldn't use force against somebody unless they use force against you, you'd actually be in favor of regulation, because the whole point of regulation is not to go around like beating people up. It's to set the lines so where it says, okay, across this line, you're allowed to do things, you're allowed to pollute, whatever, and what you do has an impact on somebody else. But beyond this line, you have impacted the rest of the community too much. And then now the community has the right to sanction you. That's what all of it says. It's not saying that you can't do anything. It's not intended to put too many rules on you. That's really what. So if you believed in the principle of non-aggression, you'd be pro, not egregious regulation, but at least a minimum basic regulation.
Right. You'd be in favor of having delineations that were clear. You want things to be. I mean, let's be honest. Like, economic libertarianism is very black and white thinking, and you would think they would want things in crisp, clear black and white.
Right.
The thing is,
Right.
is that
Because this way, hey, I'm allowed to put this CO2 in the air, this many particulates in the air, and as long as I'm not going above that, you're supposed to leave me alone. And that's where it is. And it shouldn't be nebulous.
I mean, many of the principles that go along with economic libertarianism they don't transfer, or what's the word I'm looking for? Transfer is wrong, but they translate maybe very well between the different types of economies that exist, right? So there's a huge difference between what microeconomics looks like in a big city versus in a tiny little town where you have one dentist office and, or just a couple of places to choose from, right? Like those look really different. And so I don't feel like you can just sort of slap on one big way to address that.
And that's actually why discrimination is illegal. Because the libertarians say, well, if I want to discriminate against black people, white people, gay people, whatever, I should be able to do that. But the problem is that only works in a market where you actually have available choices.
And not even really there. So
if you don't, then it doesn't. The whole system falls apart.
Well, I think any system is doomed from the get-go if it marginalizes certain classes of people, and this is something we've been struggling with in the United States for our entire history. One of the things that Trump has been trying to do for the past couple of weeks since the RNC is sort of create this false reality that they're trying to sell us a story about what America is, and ignoring all the warts and blemishes and all the hardship that everyone's gone through to get us to where we are. And they literally seem to be trying to sell America a movie. It's worse than Reagan's sort of Good Morning America commercial back in like 1984. I mean, they're really like deliberately and overtly telling a litany of lies on purpose and creating a false narrative. And Brock, you can say ridiculous all day long. Come and argue your point on screen, and right. I will enjoy the repartee.
Well, I mean, he already basically repeated something that we here established apparently before he got here. That the boycotts are basically meaningless.
Of limited value, yeah.
I mean, he has already repeated that apparently in some kind of an attempt to say that we're wrong. So he's basically
the internet makes everything a niche, and every advertiser promoter is promoting to a niche, whatever niche wants their product, their service. And so, and there's infinite niches. It doesn't matter if you're, selling furry dildos. There's a market for you.
That sounds like a hygiene problem.
Eureka! Well, my investment opportunity is revealed.
Yeah, but the point is, it doesn't matter how many Christians decide to boycott your furry purple dildos or whatever. There is the niche that is your actual target audience.
Right. Well, that's why there's no black people don't boycott hockey, because there's like 3 black players and no black people in the stands.
Right.
But it's the same, going back to the libertarians real fast, it's the same thing when it comes to jobs. They're like, well, you don't need labor laws, because if your job treats you badly, just go get a different job. Of course, you may have a specialized training in only a certain industry, so your skills may not translate elsewhere. You don't have absolute freedom of job movement.
And it's a total power imbalance.
That's right. If
the single mother has no power against Walmart.
Right. If you could just pick up and move anywhere in the world you wanted to, and you didn't have to worry about language barriers or cultural barriers, and you could find work that did everything, you probably wouldn't need a regulation, because you would just go wherever you wanted. But that's not the reality we live in. And again, for Paul's point, you keep talking about how we don't want to hear opinions other than our own. You haven't given one. All you said is we're wrong, and you're too chicken shit to come here and face us face up. So stop being a punk bitch and get in the fucking thing, or shut the fuck up.
Damn. How do you really feel, Jeff?
I'm in rare form tonight, man. I'm hot.
This is not the first time that you have basically.
I have. Hey, Brock.
I've said, if you got something to say, come and say it here, and don't just throw spitballs. Don't be a wimp.
Or better yet, just go to the closest mirror, Brock, and say into the mirror 3 times, serious mind, serious mind.
I mean, I actually would like Brock to be in here because I feel like that the topics that we're talking about can't even really be expressed adequately through a chat, right? Like, these are some big concepts, and they're not only can most people not even type fast enough to make points on something like that, but then once you've done that, it's TLDR for everybody reading the chat, right? So,
it's also like, I can't even read the chat. I don't even know where it is in this app. So, come on.
You have to go to the actual
speaking
YouTube
into the
channel.
void.
Well, come in and prove me wrong, Brock. You're just making excuses as to why you're wussing out on us. That's really, and you've been in on us with us before. I also noticed you're a lot more polite when you're on here than when you're in the chat. There's a big reason for that, because you're a punk bitch and you won't come on here. That's why.
Oh, no. He's not a punk bitch. He's a genuinely nice guy who's misguided.
Dude, you've been called out. Joe called you out. Put you on blast.
The thing that makes it difficult is for someone who has a very differing opinion is it's 5 people against 1.
Hey,
and that's a difficult position
Sometimes
to be
you
in.
got to pick and choose the things you respond to, I think.
I feel like I've actually agreed with Brock. Like, I'm probably the only one of us here that I've agreed with him on a number of things that he's said in the past. I mean, I don't agree with him on pretty much anything that touches religiosity in any way, shape, or form. But when it comes to like kind of some libertarian ideas, I feel like I kind of have agreed in the past. So that's I mean, not on everything.
Well,
but that's part of why I like to debate with him.
When he was here on the stream and he talked to us like a human being, yeah, there was stuff that he and I agreed on. But he doesn't want to do that because he'd rather play in the chat and act like a tough guy, typical right wing garbage.
He just said America's freaking awesome, and I'll say it's panned out for me.
It panned out for you? Is that what you just said?
Yeah.
Oh man.
I mean,
here's
conservatives keep telling me that if I don't love this country, I should leave it. And believe me, I'm looking at emigrating. So,
dude, you can't. You cannot.
I know. We're trapped.
I mean, you can emigrate. Well, I mean, I guess kind of maybe you can, but I hate that comment so much. Like, if you don't like it here, just leave. Like, really? What's the reason you don't pick up and move across town? Fucker.
I love that comment because if they believe that if you don't like this country, that you should go to another country, that means that they're pro-immigration.
Right?
Well, here's the other thing too that I think is kind of funny about Brock. So he's like, "Oh, you just don't like people that have a different opinion than you, or you think that people have a different opinion you are wrong." That's what he said. So, Brock, do you think that there's people who think different things than you, and you think they're correct? Because if so, you think they're correct and they think different than you, then why don't you change your mind? That would be that's nonsensical thing to say. You think people that think different than you are wrong, and they think that you're wrong. Ta-da! That's how it works. Because if someone says something that's different than what I think, and I think they're right, I change my mind. So that's how it's supposed to work. It would be really messed up if I said, you know what, they're right, but fuck it, I'm just going to keep going on with this other bullshit. That would be really
green. Sorry.
What do you think? What do you think about Trump recently, over the past 24 hours, making it so federal agencies and in federal jobs, they can no longer promote and teach and require people watch seminars about critical race theory?
Can he even do that?
Well, it's on a federal level, so yeah, he probably can.
Yeah, but he says a lot of bullshit that he can't do. I mean, I guess like there's two minds there. One, is that even possible for him to do? And two, horrible. It is.
That's all paid for appropriated by Congress. So I don't think that he can decide that.
I think it's
to a certain extent he can control what's disseminated within his purview in the executive branch.
The executive branch,
right?
And that was what the memo was addressing. but it didn't extend to places like education, like higher learning. But what they characterized in that memo that critical race theory was like a complete like cherry picking for like the worst example of what it could be, and yeah, it was basically like turning critical race theory into anti-white theory.
Yeah, he said
Well, I mean, if you look
propaganda.
if you look at Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility book, which I've read the whole thing, and that book pretty much teaches that white people are racist by default, and that individualism is a toxic ideology, and that the meritocracy is a lie.
Well,
I don't know.
meritocracy is pretty difficult to suggest exists. I mean,
Yeah.
there's
somebody
no
to
such
give me a
thing as
definition of what
meritocracy.
you mean by meritocracy here in this context, so that
Yeah, so I'll say this about the book White Fragility. It's not great. It really trades in a lot of racial essentializing. It's a pretty unfortunate thing that book has sort of become sort of a marker of what the left's beliefs are on race in general, some sort of flagship, because it's not great. It's Now I haven't read it cover to cover. I've kind of done the summarized version of it, and I've heard a few interviews, and honestly, it's dealing in stuff that is it's not helpful. I'll just put it that way.
The question I have, though, is what does that have to do with sensitivity training? Because I've been through sensitivity training in multiple companies, and at no time were they getting into critical race theory. It was literally like, hey, don't be to one another, and we have to be sensitive to one another, and everybody, including the white people. But I know that in all the trainings I went through, I had a lot of white dudes like perceiving it as, oh my God, they're attacking us, and when it was literally like, no, it was just like,
yes, but it's for exactly the reasons that we were talking about earlier. So that's what the thing is like. And if you even read, which I was reading it earlier, what he had said, I was reading an article about it, and it had the verbiage or whatever. But if you watch right wing and alt right media, you will see undoubtedly that anything having to do with white people being prejudiced, systemic, the ideas of systemic racism, yada yada yada, all of those in their mind and in their presentation to people that listen to it are things that are social theories, hypotheses. It is their ideology that they have decided is true, that they are trying to brainwash people with, that they are trying to force into our people, our country, or whatever, and we should be resisting that. And so the whole concept that diversity training is even needed means that you must accept the notion that things are not equal, and then that inequality comes from someplace. And since basically white people are the ones that control most of the power in this country, that means that the white people are the ones causing it, and they're just like, no, this is a terrible thing. I don't know. That's how they put it to their people, is that this is just a leftist ideology that is infiltrating our people, our colleges, everything. And so I guess when you pose it to people like that, and you're like, we don't need diversity training, this is just a leftist ideology. It doesn't come from, it's just a thing they made up. In the same way that the left says a bunch of old white men just sit around and make up laws, when they want to bash on the right. Neither of those is really true.
Well, it's pitched even more than that as a religion. This is the religion of the left. And of course, anybody who spends any time really looking at American history, particularly with an open mind, and particularly if you don't racially essentialize, if you can separate yourself and the fact that you may have grown up white from people who were white in the past who did bad things, because you may be genetically connected, but you're certainly not like spiritually or morally connected. There isn't a genetic algorithm for their violence translating into your violence. If you're able to make that separation, you can look at it pretty easily, and say, these people who happen to share, a few genetic components, physical traits with me, did some really horribly wrong things. And it's important to understand that those things, like a chain of dominoes, have consequences that exist now in the current day. That is very different than what they're saying, which is racial essentializing. And unfortunately, what the book about white fragility does, which sort of creates this idea that white people, black people are literally separate. Almost, it gets into the territory of treating people like separate species, separate tribes that have different souls.
Here's the thing, though, as I said before. So white America has a problem with that, but again, at the same time, constantly does the same thing to non-white people all the time. The idea that basically, people that I'm superficially, it's the what about Chicago thing. I'm superficially, several generations back, 15, 20 generations back, connected to some gangbang asshole in Chicago. Because that happened, police can gun me down for no fucking reason. And so it's like, that's why I'm so fed up, because it's like, they don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that I'm connected to some people who did some bad. It's like, you do that all the time. So if white people would stop doing that, it would be a lot easier to stop it in the other direction. Because you're right, you're not responsible. You're not personally responsible for what some shithead did in the 1800s or the 1900s or last week. But if you are benefiting from it and you don't do anything about it, you are culpable for that.
Yeah, and even just sort of understanding that I can face a police traffic stop and have a much better outcome likelihood. I mean, it's not like the police don't shoot white people too.
Right.
1,100 people a year are killed by cops, but the averages are different, or the
per capita.
Yeah, and
well, that's just the shooting. That's not the treatment. The overall treatment is a completely different.
And again, I grew up in a black neighborhood in Oakland, and my favorite story was like 14 with 3 of my friends. I was the only white kid. Cops rolled up. We were skating underneath MacArthur Park Station, and of course, my 3 friends are all cuffed and roughed up, heads banged against the cop car hood and all that kind of stuff. I'm the only one not handcuffed. What's different? So
right.
It's simple stuff like that. But the fact that happened isn't to blame on the fact that I happen to share physical traits with white people, but that I recognize that the domino effect of hundreds of years of treating people differently meant that I got to stand there without handcuffs and without being roughed up while my friends didn't. And that is all sensitivity training is. It's all critical race theory is recognizing that there is a difference in treatment, not based on who you are, but based on what externally somebody else presumes you are.
Right.
And I think that's the problem with the right-wing belief about how this is taught, and it's taught badly sometimes. Again, I think white fragility, outside.
Well, I mean, one of the
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the things that's being taught, and it's part of the white fragility thing, is this notion that being not racist isn't considered good enough. People have to actively be anti-racist, or we're considered being contributing
No, I mean,
to
What
white
you're saying right
supremacy.
there, look at what Brock is saying in the comments. He says, anyone who simplifies or separates any human on the standards of color is a racist. And what he's tried to say is, you guys are racists too.
Right.
But
Well,
what we're trying to do is find out if there's a discrepancy in how races are treated and remedy that. And for that, he wants to call us racists.
Right. So simply looking about whether or not people are treated differently is, in his mind, racist in and of itself, which is, of course, is horseshit. It's basically.
well, but just like with misogyny, though, just like with sexism issues, right? The idea of racism includes power dynamics. So the reason that we don't say that white people are or that black people are racist when they do what we would essentially, if they were white, we would say that was racist behavior, is because they aren't at the power level that white people are. Their actions that they're taking are in response to, they're reactive to the racism that is existing.
I would even still call that racist too. The difference is that what impact does that actually have on society? Is that one has a bigger impact than the other. So you can find, Willie on the corner, some old dude, and he can think terrible things about white people, and that's bad. And I would call that racist. However, he has no ability to actually discriminate against anybody or to affect anybody's life. So going back to Kazum's point about that person putting the money.
Yes, but I think that the point is that it isn't truly possible, for example, because we're talking about a minority, right? So it isn't truly possible, even if, and I've experienced things like this actually, not necessarily from Black people, but I definitely have experienced things like this when I've traveled abroad and people have found out that I'm American, and then they just don't want to deal with me on the fact that I'm American. I mean, that's basically like racism. I've experienced it with other minority demographics when it comes to getting service at their places, that if I'm a white person standing in there, my service takes extra long, they're kind of shitty to me, but the person behind me looks like them and they're like, hey bro, how's it going, kind of a thing, right? The thing is though, is that part of the idea of racism is who is the majority, right? Because the minority can't, even if all of them were like full-blown racist, like we're not going to serve you because of the color of your skin, sort of a thing, right? And they just balls out said that, they as an entire demographic could not be influentially racist, right? Because they're the minority.
I mean, we had this example just before Ahmaud Arbery was killed, of the Central Park Karen, who called the police on the bird watcher. And I just want anybody to try and imagine that circumstance flipped, of a black man calling the cops on a white
Period.
woman, who was like doing anything. Yeah, like it just flip the races in that situation, and it becomes crystal clear what we're talking about when we're talking about power dynamic. Who has the power to call the cops and leverage state violence on their behalf?
Right, which is something Brock should care about. But here's the thing, though. He's saying we shouldn't pound it into the culture 24/7. Well, Brock, the downtrodden are being pounded 24/7. So you think, maybe you could deal with a tiny bit of being made aware of it. That shouldn't hurt you.
I mean, most people, I've seen videos of seminars where people are getting racial sensitivity training or whatever. And it's like a room full of middle-aged white people for the most part. And they'll say, hold your hand up if you would trade places with a black person in America. And no one holds their hand up, right? And that's tacit or even overt admission that there's a problem in America, right?
My university went further. They tried to put a price on being black, and they found that white people were willing to sell their skin color and be black. for around $3 million.
3 million.
3 million.
Which of course, I mean, most black, if you gave them, most black people 3 million, they'd probably be all right. But even there, although we know even being rich and black in America doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be treated well. I mean, what team was it? The guy is like team owner or somebody in the upper office. He wasn't recognized by the security guard. He's got his pass that says he belongs there,
Right.
and the security guard held him up. And it's like, that's his boss. It's literally his fucking boss. And it didn't matter because all he saw was a black.
You get black congressmen arrested while they're protesting too.
Has spoken for that as well.
So I just want to jump in real quick. One thing that I find interesting, that the Trumpsters, for the most part, seem to be suffering either consciously or unconsciously from the fear that white folks are going to be a minority in America. And, and demographically, it is true that I think we're already close to 50% or less than 50%. And by 2050, white people will still be a plurality, but we won't be the majority ethnicity in America. And there's white people freaking out about this because they're afraid that one day white people might be a minority. And what that betrays is that they know it sucks to be a minority, right? So the obvious solution is to make it not suck to be a minority. And then right. What your ethnicity is.
Right. My veil of ignorance.
Yeah, my favorite meme of all time is the one of Willy Wonka, and it's like Gene Wilder's Willy Wonka. It says, "Oh, you're afraid about becoming a minority? Why are minorities treated badly in America or something?"
Well, I mean, I think it's minorities end up in any situation. Minorities are not going to be treated the same as the majority. So
it depends on how people are being classified, though. Like if you see far less, even in pearly white Scandinavia, there's not there's not a lot of brown people, but there's some. You have the Sami, a few other people. Generally speaking, it's more equitable there than it is here.
That's fair. Yeah.
The safety net, the social safety net that they have, keeps it a little bit more equitable there.
Right.
And one of the things I feel is racist about me is that I have this complete confidence that if I lost everything, I could make it back to where I am in a couple years, right? I could go completely bankrupt and I'm going to be okay. I'm not going to be homeless for too long, right? And I'm not going to have to use too many social services to get back out. And I completely have this confidence in my whiteness that I will reach in that backpack, pull out a whole bunch of favors, and be right back up to where I am.
Yeah,
and those countries that have the social safety net for everyone, they fare a lot better in equity.
Well, and now mind you, I've always felt like
experience. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Don't trust that feeling you have. I am currently what you see in the background here. I live in a truck. I'm doing advertising. As recently as 4 years ago, I still get ad jobs, but I experienced exactly that downward spiral. Now I am building myself back up, but let's be real, it's a lot harder in America to come back up from homelessness, regardless of skin color, than I think most people realize. And being homeless is actually it's significantly more challenging to get out of than don't test that theory is all I'm saying.
To be fair, as an addiction counselor, I help people who hit rock bottom all the time climb back up. So I know all the social programs to take the quickest path.
That would
I know the cheat route on Candyland. Okay?
Yeah. I know that same list.
See, I was going to address Brock for 1 second. He says, I'm assuming he's talking to me. He says, you don't look downtrodden. Well, first off, what does a downtrodden person look like? It's kind of like the person that the first day someone's homeless, they don't smell and their clothes are clean, and you're like, oh, he doesn't have a problem. Secondly, as I've said multiple times, and there's plenty of evidence of that. Now I'm okay financially. I'm not downtrodden, but in other ways, again, I get treated differently where I go, and the fact that despite my economic success, I'm still not safe says a lot. So when cops come up to your car with their hand on their weapon because you have a tail light out, or they ask you what you're doing in that neighborhood on a county road, and they basically the implication that you don't belong there. And this happens all the time, and this does happen all the fucking time. Yeah, nobody's freaking out because only you. Well, you're just not you because Brock, because you don't care, and that's the thing. That's fine. You don't have to care, but don't give me this bullshit that nobody is opposed to looking soberly at real racism, because that's exactly why we're here in this state.
Joe's not white. 6 white people waxing poetic about racism. Joe, now you're white.
I'm not white, you idiot.
Something I want to just say real quick is that I think everyone is slightly racist, and we all have to use our brains to look past and to get past the problems with that. And as it's been said, the effects of racism in God, I'm flubbing now. Racism doesn't, like, if someone's white and they're racist, it has quite a bit more effect. And if they're blatant about it and they treat people poorly based on their race, it has quite a different effect than if someone black is racist and treats people poorly based on their race. But I do think that everyone has a bit of racism, everyone has a bit of sexism, everyone has a bit of xenophobia in them, and we all have to use our brains to get past those things.
It's kind of like what we were saying earlier about.
Sorry, let me do this real quick. You just perfectly expressed what the difference between being not racist and anti-racist is. Anti-racist is using your brain to consciously pick apart parts of yourself that are unconsciously biased, because we are human. And that's why being passively, I'm against racism, it does mean that you're sort of like, if you're just going along to get along, you are kind of participating in the entire structure. You're not doing anything to change the structure, and that is what they mean when they say you're supporting white supremacy. It doesn't mean that you're an active supporter. It means that by not putting in that little bit of effort and thinking about how you might have unconscious biases, that you're
to use a metaphor, if you're paddling against racism, the minute you stop paddling, you go back along with the flow, so you constantly have to be fighting against it. And if you're not, whether you're actively a part of the energy or not, you're still going along with it, and that's not all right. Listen, there's one thing I wanted to bring up before it's getting close to ending time, and there's one thing I kind of wanted to bring up, and it's much more lighthearted of a topic, and I hope that's all right with y'all. This has been a pretty deep one, friends, and I'm pleasantly surprised. It's really meandered like everywhere. But this is kind of amusing, and it's really like not even that important. But as a metaphor, I mean, there's been 2 Trump flotillas now where they've had boats sinking. I think today, like 4 boats sank in the Trump flotilla. And how is it? It's hilarious. So I want to laugh about that for a minute, but I also want to ask you, how is it that Voters for Trump is a national thing where Trump wants to portray himself as like the common man's hero, right? If you own a yacht, unless you live in Alaska, you're probably pretty well off. I mean, when I say that because when I lived in Alaska, like 70% of everybody owned a boat. I mean, everybody owned a boat. People own boats that didn't own cars. You know what I mean? So
if you own a boat with a motor that can keep up with the flotilla, you're doing well off. And it doesn't matter what size of boat we're talking about. If you've got a boat, that's money you could have put towards car repairs. That's a little bit more money than other people have.
We had the whole Trump parade, and all those we saw all the trucks, the Trump flags on them. None of those are cheap trucks. there weren't any dented trucks in that parade. Those were $75,000 trucks, a lot of them. They were lifted,
Right.
you know, they were extra long body, crew cab.
They're Duck Dynasty hillbillies.
Yeah, they're what people in Humboldt County call the Grodozer.
Yeah, well, I just thought it was hilarious because you said it's so metaphoric of, hey, we're there for Trump and we're sinking, and I also think it's probably the idea that again that right wing libertarian idea that we don't need regulation, so we don't have to maintain our vehicles, we just go out there, we just do things, and oh wow, people sink. And Brock, just real quick, the fact that you have some black friends that were financially successful doesn't mean that they don't face bigotry. That's again what you make. So once again, libertarian, you only care about the financial. And there's so much more. Although financial is a big thing too, there's a lot more to the story. But again, because you got this narrow view that everything in the world is on these narrow economic issues. You have no clue. You basically you're looking through a straw at the world and trying to decide how things are.
Hey, who's talking about me and my conspicuous consumption over here? These, you can't eat just one. Come on now.
Well, one person thinks it's fruitless, Brock, because you're a coward. That's why. We've had a good conversation before, which you don't even want to admit, but you won't come on and talk to us in person. So you're irrelevant. You've made yourself irrelevant.
I mean,
well, I don't know about him being irrelevant. I mean, like I said, this in text it doesn't matter if it's 5 or 10 against 1, but if you're in a live chat, it can be rough to be in a situation where it's 5 people against 1. If we were a little bit more balanced in the kind of viewpoints that we had, if we had more right wingers on the panel, it would be a lot easier for him to come in.
No way. If we had more right wingers, hold on. It's hard to come into, not so much mocking you here, Kazum, but the very notion that it's hard to come into a panel where it's 5 against 1 when the person that's the one comes from the side of politics that's like all of those pussy fucking leftists out there doing the thing, and they're fucking snowflakes all of the time. Bruh, me and my guns and all of the stuff, and I'm so tough. But then that person's like, oh well, I don't want to be outnumbered. Oh
yeah.
Listen, Kazum, and this is actually not just Kazum. I'm pushing this out to everybody, including Jack, who's off screen at the moment. But I'm always open to having guest speakers. That's how Jack got here in the first place. I thought, I haven't had Jack on the Breakfast Club for a long time. I'll see if he's available. Boom, he was available, and that's pretty cool. But Jack's obviously not a right winger. The only real people that are like objectively on the right, and they would describe themselves more as libertarians rather than on the right, would be Brock and also Wayne Watley. And I really liked it when Wayne was on the Breakfast Club. He was on for a few months back in the early days. Do you remember Wayne, Sister Danger? He had glasses and a beard. He's a bit of a
maybe.
Lives down in Louisiana, and he's got a sort of a southern accent, and he's a vegan.
I was going to say something real quick, though. If you actually want to have more people on this channel, I have the paid-for StreamYard that I use for my stuff, and I believe that I am on the Breakfast Club channel with permissions to log into that. I could add Breakfast Club to my StreamYard, and then we can have up to 10 people simultaneously in one of these.
Well,
just putting that out there for you.
Nice. Also, I would ask, should we invite anti-vaxxers and flat earthers for balance? I mean,
I won't have anti-vaxxers and I won't have flat earthers, but I will have conservatives, I will have Republicans, I will have libertarians, I will have people on the far left. I've tried to get those as well, but they don't seem to come either. No, as long as, we've already discussed privately who I can't have on for reasons that we've already discussed. But we've invited, just for example, RW several times, and he's just never showed up. I've invited him 4 or 5 times. I know Michael's invited him once. it's not as if I don't try to balance out the discussion. And this is something I want Brock to know, if he's still out there as well, is that it's not as if I don't have, I send out approximately anywhere between 12 and 20 invitations every week. And most of the people that you're looking at here are my hardcore. And there's obviously others as well who aren't here, who are part of the hardcore. But I mean, basically, others drift in and out, and that's okay. You know, this is we're all adults, and we've all got busy lives, and I totally get that.
Well, I think it's also funny though.
If you know somebody who can carry a decent point succinctly, so everyone else gets a chance to talk and won't try and dominate the conversation, but can have a back and forth. I mean, Tommy from the Bronx is another one. Tommy's not a lefty, but he's not a right guy either. And he would definitely be mixing it up. And I've tried every week. I send Tommy an invitation every week. And like Brock, he shows up in the chat sometimes, but he's only been on camera with us once. And I really wish I could get more sort of diversity of opinion on camera. I really do. I think it'd be great for the whole conversation.
Well, see, the thing is, though, I mean, I want to say, where's Brock when Kate and I are screaming at each other, you know, because Kate's further to the left than I am. I'm center left. And so, you know, we disagree. She and I disagree all the time, but, you know, so obviously we can have conversations with people, you know, we disagree with. And Kate, you know, I've never killed Kate. Kate's never killed me. We've even met in person. So, you know, we get along basically.
I mean, Nathan's a little bit more to the right on lots of specific things. I don't know if
I
he
love
was
him.
invited, but yeah,
Nathan's
he's a good buddy of mine.
Well, even our RW, as we mentioned, I used to, you know, he was always more to the right than me, and I like him. I don't like where he's gone, but you know.
I just want to know how anybody can still possibly support Trump. That's it. That's all I want to know. I don't get it. After all of the things, I just don't understand. What'd you say he was polling at? Serious 43% or something?
Oh yeah, 43%.
Fear.
Have you ever seen
Fear
the
is the
movie?
reason. Fear.
Have you ever seen the movie The Money Pit?
I have not.
Okay,
Yes.
so
Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks. Yeah, Tom Hanks and his wife buy a beautiful old house for a ridiculously cheap amount of money, and hijinks ensues as they attempt to fix it up. They spend more and more money in it, and it just turns out to be worse and worse and worse. And I think that's really what we're looking at.
Some cost fallacy.
Yeah.
So
What did that have
somebody
to do with anything? I missed. Like, I didn't get that.
People get invested into Trump.
Oh, I see.
And
Okay.
It can get worse and worse, but
I
they
saw-
feel stuck with it.
one of the Facebook groups that I'm on, it's a leftist group. It's a political group. Somebody had posted that there was a Trump rally happening somewhere locally, and they were like, "We got to step up our game. Come on, guys, we got to get out there too." And I commented, and I just, you know, if you really want to step up your game, vote. It drives me crazy that there's this feeling that somebody's out there rallying or protesting, and everybody has to go and either join every single protest or be a counter protester for every single protest. If Trump people want to go out and rally and wave their flags and their banners and hoot and holler, let them.
You know,
Well, and again, I do have a lot of contempt for people who go to rallies and don't vote.
Yeah, I don't
Also,
believe
the
that
census. You got to
voting.
participate in the census.
Yeah, I don't personally believe that voting does anything. I'm certainly to Sirius's left in this particular regard. Is that I think that voting is a nearly meaningless act. The threat of my vote has more leverage than my vote. That said, I vote in every election.
Good.
And I do that because it doesn't hurt me to vote. But I do believe that being out there in the streets is a lot more effective than your actual vote. But you might as well vote also.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, certainly, to me, voting is the start of action. It's not the end of it. It shouldn't be.
Well, hey, if the voting thing was to pick up enough, because a lot of the reason that I hear that people don't vote is because they think their vote doesn't matter because electoral college. And maybe if more people voted, right, if they just came out in mass and voted, then it would create demonstrable evidence that the electoral college is terrible and should go away, because then they would be able to see and know for a fact that the populace voted one way, but the electoral college voted another way. And I'm not saying that would happen, because it's happened very few times in American history, actually, where the electoral college has gone against the populace. But if that's what they believe, then that's one of the ways to show it, is to get out and vote. And if that electoral college is then continuing to do the thing, because when they can sit back and say, wow, there's like still all these people over here, this huge demographic of people didn't even vote or whatever, so we can assume that those people were on our side, right?
Two things. One, the electoral college only affects the president, so it doesn't excuse everybody for
all
not
the primaries
voting in the House and Senate, or the primaries, because again, they people don't vote in the primaries, then complain about the bad choices available at the time. Well, it's like, well, you had the opportunity to influence that, and you didn't. You missed it. Secondly, 40% of the American electorate did not vote for president last time, which is more than had that voted for either of the two candidates that got votes.
Right. Yeah.
Now, I mean, another thing that's out there, a tool that's available that is used only in a few places, unfortunately, and it's a big deal for me, is ranked choice voting.
Yeah.
That would go a long way to
I think that would change my opinion quite a bit, because my issue with voting has nothing to do with the electoral college and has almost entirely to do with money and politics. Just the fact that you can, there's no good reason why Bloomberg should have been on that debate stage. Unfortunately, he was thrashed. But just the fact that with enough money you can simply buy yourself onto the debate stage without having any ideas.
But you can't buy yourself the position, obviously.
But I mean,
you can't. But you can. We got ourselves. It's like is
how do you get politicians? Sorry, I was going to say, how do you get
anybody's first?
How do you get politicians? Sorry, how do you get politicians to enact ranked choice voting when it might be against their own interests to do so?
I know that's the really tough.
I'm a politician. I'm a politician. I think I can qualify as a politician now. I am currently running for office. I am the Democratic nominee for the office that I am seeking. And I am running on one of my positions is ranked choice voting. And I know for a fact in the county that I live in, it would eventually get me voted out. If I were to win this time, I'll lose next time because of ranked choice voting. But I still think it's an important enough issue.
Right.
That I don't care if I get reelected or not. The point of my running has nothing to do with I want to get in office and stay in office, and I will do whatever it takes to get there. There are things that need to be done. I mean, I've got all kinds of stuff on my platform.
Fascinating. Yeah.
And I want to see them come to fruition, and then I'll happily be on my way.
Right. That's the thing. The answer is to support politicians that run on a platform that support ranked choice voting, and if there aren't any, find one or become one.
Also,
because that's the other thing too. I see so. Well, I was gonna say I see so few people that are very active that claim like. What's that?
You could collect enough signatures to put it on the ballot.
Right, as a ballot measure. That's right.
It would be a lot of signatures.
And there's a lot of people who complain and march, and they literally do not understand the way the government functions, even despite the fact that all this information is available on the internet. And that pisses me off.
To be fair, I learned none of it in school. None of it.
Right.
Joe, are you saying that the internet isn't just for porn?
What?
Believe it or well, see, it's internet for porn plus learning out how to vote and how to register and how to.
Okay.
I mean, to serious point, I do think that people in the streets is a function of how we make change. Having just the fact that we had, at the height of these recent protests, 60 million people globally in streets. I mean, George Floyd's murderers weren't initially arrested or charged. This has a lot more power than your typical politician, and you have to get a lot of politicians on your side before you start to see politicians change, and you get politicians on your side with very visible public pressure. And this is why, for myself personally, I think that being a body in the street as a part of that large mass of people, which sucks because we're in the middle of a pandemic and that's scary, but it's that visual that ultimately forces the politician's hand. So if you did vote for them and they changed their mind, it's likely because they saw you out in the street and didn't want to lose your vote next time.
You have to vote for people that are the most amenable to the things you want, and then back that up with action. And that's
ranked choice voting would certainly make the two-party system less powerful than it is for sure.
For instance, Jack, to your point, if there had been people in the streets during the Obamacare debate and saying, we want the public option, we demand the public option, we probably have a public option. The problem is the right wingers actually did. They letter bombed their representatives. They showed up in their representatives' offices. We don't want this Nazi healthcare, and the left didn't do that. And so that's why. And that's what pissed me off on our side. It's like where's the fucking rest of the action? Like you're out there and that's awesome. But there's so many people who don't do that, and so that's the way. So marching the streets is one thing, but marching to your representative's office and letter bombing them and saying, well, sorry, that's wrong choice of words. Sending them lots of letters. let me clarify. Letter bombing is a different thing. But sending them lots of letters and showing up and getting appointments and having groups go, because I have a family who they have one of the family members has a child with special needs. They were born with a lot of physical ailments and they need a lot of medical care that's not covered under normal thing, and they basically have to get on Medicaid. And so they ended up forming a lobbying group. It was a bunch of mothers that were taking care of these special needs children, and so they now actually have the ear of Nancy Pelosi and Bernie Sanders and what's her name? From Massachusetts, Senator. I'm drawing a blank on Elizabeth Warren. So and that's how they did it. They didn't just march in the streets. They marched to their office and actually met these people and said, "Hey, look at my child. See my child with the problem. This needs attention." And they got it. And they got attention.
Yeah, and that is lobbying. And there's a lot of people on the left and the right. I mean, people on both sides will say we should end lobbying, and what we need to do is end paid lobbying, because people do. Lobbying is a critical part of the way our government functions. The fact that you go and you personally speak to your representative and you convince them that it's in their best electoral interest to side with you. That is a maybe the most critical part of democracy, because I've worked for representatives before, done phone banking, and something that a lot of people don't know is that every time you call your state representative, or if you send them a letter, that's technically a vote. You voted in a poll. It's an informal poll, but they are cataloging every call that comes into the office and what the complaint or concern of the constituent was. And so I do think that, if you believe in voting, you should be calling your state representative, even if, or maybe even particularly if there's somebody who totally disagrees with you. If you live in a red state and you've got if you've got Mitch McConnell in your state, or whoever, you're still putting a tally mark in their books for your position that they wouldn't have if you don't make that call. Now, that's
Right.
a lot of work. Most people aren't going to do that, but I do think that the left is in general, I mean, we were lazy under Obama. There's no doubt about it. And the fact that Obama didn't really do very much for the left or working people in general is a very big part of how we got Trump. Had we gotten universal, free at the point of access health care under Obama, I doubt we would have Trump right now.
Right. And one thing I'll just to address one thing you just said, I actually certainly if you're in a red district or a red state where you have your congressional your House representative or your senator, but even if they are a blue, I mean, if anything, they should be more receptive to what you're talking about. And plus the fact that you're more likely to vote for them, that your voice is actually going to carry more weight. I feel that if the center left, and far left were to make more visits and show up to their representatives and write the letters and make the calls, the Democrats would be further to the left than they are right now. But they basically look at who, like you said, who's calling, and if they're getting more complaints from right-wing people saying, "Oh, don't you dare bring in this socialist healthcare," they're going to go, "Oh, gee, because I want to get reelected again."
Yeah,
I just want to chime in real quick, Jack, if you don't mind. Just want to chime in real quick because I wanted to back up what you and Joe both were saying about actually utilizing the means of the levers of democracy by contacting your representatives and stuff, because now we have the internet. Where it's easier than it's ever been before. You can find out there's websites, you can find out exactly how to contact them and do it lickety split, right? It's pretty simple. And do you remember right after Trump became president, like in the first 5 or 6 weeks that Trump was president, he attempted to do the first Muslim ban attempt. And I was so proud. Obviously, I was living in Britain at the time, but I was so proud of America because spontaneously tens of thousands of people poured into airports all over the country and just said, "No, not on my fucking watch." And I was so fucking happy that kind of spontaneous demonstration happened. But since then, we've had so much outrage fatigue. And it took something as outrageous as the murder of George Floyd to get people motivated again to get that kind of active. But the problem is the activity
being abandoned during
is being exploited by Trump for his own re-election purposes, because it's in his interest to try to look like the guy who's quashing dissent or stopping destruction or whatever. That fits the narrative that he's trying to create, But as anybody who pays close enough attention knows, the vast majority of demonstrations and protests don't involve any physical harm or violence against property. And most of the ones that do have violence against people, more often than not, the violence is initiated by the authorities. So, it's tricky times. I don't even remember where I had a point where I was going and I can't remember, but I did want to say this about that.
Levers of power.
Yeah.
Power.
Sorry?
So you're talking about using the levers of power?
Oh yeah, thank you. Getting back on track. Yeah, after the Muslim ban, they were going to try to repeal Obamacare, and millions of people contacted their congresspersons and said no, 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 and they did it. They had like a nonstop barrage for like 10 days, and the congresspeople had thousands and thousands of calls and emails and facsimiles and whatever, and they just said, no, we can't do this, we can't do this. So they are afraid of the people power, because they do know that no matter how much donors' money they get, if people don't vote for them, it won't matter how many donations they had, right? But it's not necessarily all about donations. And I think we've got a political class in both houses and in both parties which have unfortunately adopted this notion over the past 3 or 4 decades that getting donations equals getting in, not that getting votes equals getting in. The more donations you get, the more likely you are to win. That's just been historically true. But I think one of the revolutions that Bernie Sanders has sort of turned that on his head by showing you that people don't have to necessarily get mega donors in order to have a viable campaign. And that's probably Bernie's best legacy for the future. I mean, there's a whole generation of people, not just the Justice Democrats, but others as well, who are coming up, who are going to, running for office without going for any corporate or PAC money. And I think that's pretty important. I'm going to let Deb back on, and I'm going to trust you guys to wrap up in the next 10 minutes, or I'm just going to come over and be bombastic. All right.
I have to go watch some more Cobra Kai, so that's a thing.
That's the thing. Did they come out with season 3 yet?
I don't know. I'm not even through season 1, I don't think.
Yeah, I thought it's season 2 is what's on now, right? Or
Yeah.
no?
No spoilers.
I missed the whole phenomenon.
I'm really waiting for season 3 to see how it all gets resolved.
I just started last night. So.
Well,
Deep
I'm looking
Ashtray.
forward to the second season of The Boys.
That
Sorry,
also, didn't
go
that
ahead.
just drop last night?
I understand it. Yeah, so I'm excited about that. Anyway, you were saying, Kazoo?
Oh, I was just going to say, Deep Ashtray made a comment, said, if you want to end the carnage and chaos in the country under the Trump presidency, vote for Trump 2020, worst campaign slogan ever. What I think, unfortunately, is what Trump is trying to say is what the push for Trump is that Trump isn't able to do what is totally authoritarian before he gets reelected. But if he gets reelected, he can do all the authoritarian things he wants to take care of the problem.
Yeah, that's kind of, I guess, what's implied. But I think what the message on that really is it's not his fault. It's the Democrats in the cities that are.
It's never his fault.
Well, I do think it's hilarious. He's basically saying, re-elect me to fix the problems I couldn't fix so far.
Yeah, but he didn't make those problems. He inherited them.
But the one thing that I'm glad of is that, I was reading some stuff post-convention, polls, and they basically, they pulled on those issues, and they basically said that his campaign, that push is actually having a backlash, is actually negative. Like 59% of people do not like that line of campaigning and argumentation.
The one, wait, which line?
In other words, he's saying that, well, you need me to stop the things that I haven't stopped so far. Yeah. And that basically, horrible thing, if you allow the Democrats to win, basically the United States is going to be, go up in flames. It's not playing. It plays basically with the people he already has, but nobody else.
I think he's counting on people to be stupid. And even stupid people, when they look at that or when they hear it, even stupid people have to stop and think, wait a minute.
Yeah.
That doesn't really make any sense.
It doesn't. And people want a president that's positive. And you think about how he won last time. I mean, he said a lot of, heinous, horrible stuff, but his tagline was "Make America Great." I mean, that's the most optimistic thing you could ever. It's literally the best campaign slogan anyone ever could have had. So he's ruined it and sullied it forever. But now he's basically saying, okay, I've been making America great for the last 4 years, and gee, this place is fucked up, and you need to vote for me again to make it not like it is. But people do not, generally speaking, vote in favor of a negative message. I mean, yes, right. You can tear somebody down, but you have to have some measure of optimism in your platform, or people are turned off. And
right.
What's kind of
negative?
What's kind of funny is his newest campaign thing is "Keep America Great," and he made it shit. So why would we want to keep America the way it is right now anyway?
Yeah, pictures of burning cities, and he says, "This will be Joe Biden's America." It's like, motherfucker, it's your America.
Yeah. Yeah. This isn't next year. This isn't next year. This is last Tuesday.
Right.
It's well, and the thing is, and I was watching something a few weeks back, and it was one of the pundits talking about his problem. It was actually a Republican pundit, basically saying that his problem all along has been he has never done anything to build and grow a coalition. It's literally, hey, those people who voted for me are awesome, and I'm gonna do everything. I'm gonna tilt nipple to them so they continue to support me. And fuck the rest of you. The rest of you are all losers and suckers.
Right.
And you can't win on that because at the best you
he can't afford to lose anybody, and he is losing people.
the line. If you alienate anybody else, you're just gonna lose what you had.
Yeah, and
I mean, please,
you know,
for the love of God, continue alienating people, please.
a section of his base is literally dying of COVID because he's told them all they don't need masks. It's
Right.
the worst strategy I've ever seen a politician take. And yet he still might win. I don't want to discount that. I mean, America.
I mean, at this point, though, he can win if turnout is low or if he succeeds in his shenanigans with the post office and the voting booth, voting lines and all that kind of stuff. But he has to cheat to win.
Yeah.
Is it really winning if you cheat?
What's that?
Is it really winning if you cheat?
Well, no, but unfortunately, the way our system works, if they go by the votes counted,
you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
Right.
My gal is absolutely certain that the minute polls close, she says on the East Coast, but maybe on the West Coast, that Trump's going to declare victory. Like before the votes are even like properly tabulated up to 270 for either candidate, he's just going to declare victory. Because
what do you think about the North Carolina thing?
It's the same trick that Bill Barr played with the Mueller report, right? They release this little 4-page summary, let it boil for 2 weeks until the interest is gone, and then the real report comes out and says all kinds of different shit. It's going to be the same exact motif with the election. You know, he's going to declare victory. They're going to go, hey, not so fast. He's going to go, oh, you're challenging me. And
here's
first people to rise up, and it's just going to be fucking ugly.
Yeah, there's some experts that are saying that kind of a thing. Because Democrats are mostly going to be voting through mail-in voting, and Republicans are going to be voting in person, the Republican count, or the count on election night, is going to be in, and it's going to show probably like a 50-state victory for Trump. And that's obviously before the mail-in ballots are counted. And he will most likely declare victory and try to shut down the counting of the vote.
What do you think about this North Carolina thing? The telling people in North Carolina to vote twice in case
in
their vote.
Pennsylvania too.
Yeah.
Well, this is what I'm wondering about is, so he said that, and everybody's like, that's crazy because that's voter fraud. But if people over there are to actually do that, how will that be caught? How will that not actually turn out to benefit the
ballots?
They do check them.
Yeah, mail-in ballots have like a barcode on them. They're read by a computer. It's not like somebody takes it and goes, oh, okay, this person voted for Trump. It goes in this pile. Oh, this person voted for Yogi Bear. It goes in this pile. I mean, it's read by barcode, and then all the marks that you left on are read by a machine that reads those marks. So, I mean, it's...
So, yeah, they'll know.
So if you already voted at the polls,
yes,
when your ballot, which is specific to you because it has that barcode on it, when it goes through the machine will say, oh, they already voted.
Right.
Oh, interesting. Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, and that's the reason why, despite everything the Republicans say, there's very, very few examples of actual voter fraud because the system actually works.
Yeah, most examples of voter fraud are actually examples where somebody made a pretty big error. There's very few examples of intentional voter fraud, and even the accidents are sort of like weird fluke accidents.
I also saw
in 2012 we had 17 different instances of voter fraud. One crazy person tried it 17 times
and got caught.
I also saw that what's his daughter's name? Trump's daughter.
Which one? Ivanka?
Yes, Ivanka. I saw something about how she or some company that she owns has begun to purchase voter tally machines or voter collection to replace collection boxes to replace the ones that USPS has been removing. And I'm like, that seems like a huge conflict of interest. Just saying.
Yeah. Well, but again, it's really,
article.
Steve Ashley just said it's very difficult on a national level to do it because each state, what a lot of people don't realize, each state controls the voting in their state. Each state has its own rules. That's why during the 2016,
and they work differently.
Right.
China,
Why during both of the primaries, when people were trying to say shenanigans or trying to blame one, DNC or RNC or whatever for whatever, and my point was those groups don't control that. Those are controlled by states boards of elections. The secretaries of state of the various states are the ones in charge of these things, and every state has their own rules. So it's not that it can't, not that it could never ever be done, but it would take a lot more effort than most people realize. That again, because people don't know how the process works.
Well, so here's it says China grants more trademark approvals for Ivanka Trump firm, including voting machines.
Well, that's for China, though.
It says that she's announced in July she was shutting her fashion line down to focus her role as an informal White House advisor working on advocating for women. Let's see. Approval for 16 new trademarks for fashion for the fashion brand of President Trump's daughter, advisor Ivanka, including voting machines and a search of official records showed on Tuesday. Let's see. I'm trying to find. Oh, you guys can keep talking. I'll scroll through this. And
in Colorado, where Paul and I live, the county clerk and recorder in each county determines whether or not they have enough votes to call their county. Either way, but also each one of them reports to the Secretary of State. Secretary of State doesn't finalize the entire tally until it's all in, until 100% of every precinct is reporting. They won't call the state. Now, the news will call it like 75% voted. Yeah. But the Secretary of State finalizing it is the final.
Right. Yeah. And basically, a lot of cases, what the media is doing is they're basing it on exit polls. So what they do is they look at the votes that have already been counted, where they're located, and they look at the exit polls in those areas and say, okay, based on what votes are counted and what's left to be counted, we have a rough idea of what the percentages were in those areas, so we can make a prediction how the result's going to be. But those media calling, of course, isn't official. And a lot of people don't understand that either.
I mean, the one good thing, there are some states that start counting the mail-in ballots early.
Right.
Until this year, New Jersey was not one of them. But I think it's just either like today or yesterday, it came out that we were going to start counting ours 10 days before Election Day. We're going to start counting the ballots.
Right.
So.
Another way the media
gets an effort to stop Trump from claiming victory that it's not his.
Another way the media gets their numbers from the polling stations, being a polling place coordinator, it's the law that at the end you print out a tally, right? One copy goes to the clerk and recorder. You print out another tally that goes to the clerk and recorder, and then you print out another one, and you have to tape it to an inside window, so that any reporters who want to come look at it through the window, they can see what that number that came off the machine was. So they can drive around to all the polling places and collect their numbers that way.
Right. And that's also why I remember a few years back, there were a lot of people that were concerned because remember the Gerald, it was 2004, it was the Gerald voting machines where the guy who owned Gerald was in favor of, Bush II. And so people were concerned about the mistransmission, that okay, maybe it would get transmitted, they would tally correctly, but then transmit it improperly. But basically all those get verified. So each precinct sends their numbers up, and then when the state releases, puts trouble certified, they do each of the precincts can tell, hey, that wasn't our total.
We're in trouble.
Oh no, you're not. You're not in trouble. Not at all.
Yell at us.
I just wanted to say I find it really disconcerting and troubling, like actually deeply troubling, how comfortable we all seem to have become with the the reality that shenanigans are just, this election is going to be shenanigans, and that we don't have a choice, and that our systems have completely broken, and our systems can't stop the shenanigans from happening. The shenanigans are just going to happen, and we've all just basically accepted our fate, that we have no choice. All we have is our vote. And
on top of voting and doing the census, we also had one other choice, and that was to volunteer to be a polling place worker.
Yeah. I'm not comfortable with it, Paul. It's just there's so many things going on that if I don't compartmentalize it, I would literally be running around screaming constantly.
Maybe comfortable is the wrong word. Maybe inured. We're just inured to it. I think we have outrage fatigue, and we're also just completely. There's so much over the top shenanigans from Trump on a daily basis, and it literally hasn't stopped. The only time it slows down is when he goes fucking golfing, and that's it. That's it. And no, you're not in trouble, but it is time to go. We're coming up on like that sort of time, and I'm busted. What can I say, Rob? You got me. So I'm going to say goodbye now. Then I'm let Jack come on and say goodbye because it was his first night tonight, and I'm going to leave it up to Kazoom to wrap up. Okay, Kazoom, the pressure's on. Let me get Jack back on here.
Well, I don't know what to say, but. I appreciate. I always appreciate these hangouts. We get a lot accomplished. Everyone seems to be able to have their say. They always seem to be, with the exception of when Bionic Dance and Serious Mind get into a little tissy there. Everything seems to be pretty cordial and nice. So.
I didn't know there was beef with Kate.
Usually.
They are passionate people.
We are.
I'm gonna ciabatta you guys. I'm having now like noodle food coma, so I'm so tired. I want to lay down and watch the Cobra Kai. So thank you all, though. I love being here with you guys. So I will see you soon, I hope.